Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the LPEA board meeting. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and let's go ahead and start the meeting off as we traditionally have with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance
to
the flag
the
United
United
States
States of America,
to the
and to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you very much to IT for the graphic. That was really quite nice. Okay, let's roll into let's see. Oh, first thing, approval of agenda, and I do think we have a couple of potential modifications to the agenda. Jessica, you want to speak first to that?
Yes, so staff would like to pull the net metering tariff vote today from the agenda after getting additional feedback from board members and members in the community. We would like to hit pause button and go back out and get additional feedback and bring something probably different back to the board to consider in the future.
Okay. Any other suggested changes to the agenda? Tim Wheeler.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to the executive session discussion of the broadband update on the broadband partnership.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other hands on agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those two modifications.
So moved.
Thank you, Tim. Got it.
Second by Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda with two modifications, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we have an agenda. Let's, and Rachel, your hand's up. But yeah. And you're on mute. Okay, hands down. We're gonna keep going.
Sorry, my internet froze during the vote. I voted support.
Oh, your hand was up for the vote. Thank you. Fair enough. Let's move into member comments. Graham, will you give the preamble to that?
Yes, thank you, Ted. The board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. Board asks that each participant's comment pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during the public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing, and formal complaints must be filed in writing and submitted in compliance with applicable board policy. Comments from the public will be directed to the entire board and not to any individual. No personal attacks will be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our policies and procedures on public comment and complaints are available on our website.
Thank you, Graham. Open it up for public comment. Do we see anyone? I don't see any hands.
I don't see any hands.
Okay, thanks for checking me. Then we'll go ahead and close that section and move into consent board items. As is usual, if anyone wants to remove anything from the consent board items before we vote to approve, this would be the appropriate time to do that. I see Kohler's hand.
Well, I'll make the motion to approve the consent board items, but I'd also like to remove something if it's seconded.
Do we have a second on Kohler's motion to approve?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tim. Moved and seconded. Okay, discussion, Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to pull out the director travel and training document.
Got it.
The approval or requests?
We won't approve it under the consent board, and we'll discuss it separately. Is that what you're asking for, Kohler?
Asking which documents he was using.
Oh, sorry.
The director and training request, sorry. It is a request.
F. Any other discussion? Any other things that people want removed? Okay, then we'll vote on the consent board items with the exception of item F. All in favor of approving the consent board items?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, consent board approved. And then we can have discussion about item F, director travel and training requests. Go ahead, Kohler.
Yeah, so the request comes from me. And what I didn't do when I put this down is I didn't take in consideration the new changes to policy 109. So the figures are incorrect, they're too high. For instance, the director fees I have down 1,000. By the new policy, it will be 500. And I'm not too sure on the meal per diem. I would like to get approval so I can move forward, but it would be less than what it shows there.
Okay, I mean, I'll entertain comments from the board, but I don't see any problem with us saying that we approve Kohler's request, you know, pending adjustments based on current policy.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I just am going back that, remember, a couple of years ago, we decided that, you know, as long as everyone's doing things up and up, we don't really, the board doesn't move to approve. We don't have to ask permission to approve our travel if it's within the parameters of what we're allowed. So I just wanted to bring that point out again.
Vaguely remember that as well, but we do have it on the consent board to approve that. So let's go ahead and go through with it at this point, and give Kohler try and give Kohler the approval that he's requesting. And then Joe, let's take that up and review review whether we're doing that the right way, or whether our current policy allows for us just to submit those and not approve those. But at this stage, we need a motion to approve the item F, director travel and training requests, as modified by Kohler.
So moved by Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor of approving director travel and training request with the modification, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Kirsten, I see a hand.
Yeah, that's not an opposition. That's just a reminder that I expect we would see a lot of requests for next month for the same thing that Kohler put in for this month for the innovation conference. It's a great way to get meet a lot of people and get a couple classes in for free.
Okay, thank you. And of course, Kohler's way ahead of the game on that. Okay, so let's see. I think I was going to opposed. Anyone opposed? And any abstentions to that vote? Okay, item F approved. Thank you. So we're through all the consent board items. Moving on to CEO and staff reports. And I'll let Jessica take it away.
Okay, I will preface this with I am feeling under the weather. So if I'm not so quick or if I'm coughing, I apologize. I caught my children's cold. So I am going to share my screen unless, let's see. May have to have Drew do it. I had it all teed up. Let's see if this works. Okay, can everybody see this okay? Yes, okay. All right, I will start with August division dashboards. This is just a great photo of some of our staff at the fair. Our staff did a great job of kind of rethinking some of our activities at the fair. And so what we did is we purchased STEM robot kits and invited children to come. And it was great. I think they had over 100 children come to our booth and put together STEM lab kits with staff. So that was great success. All right, moving to the performance indicators. We are all green checks except for the cash reserves again. And I just wanted to remind everybody that, see, Drew, there we go. Thanks, Drew. That the cash reserves is an issue that we're looking into. What we're finding is that when we report on cash reserves for the dashboard, it's basically on one date in time, not an average across the month. And so it's not a good reporting how we report it. The cash reserve metric is adequate, but how we report it just one day in time is not so much accurate, because by the time we report on these financials, we're back up to our cash range of between 12 and 20%. So with Patrick new on board, we're looking at that, and we will be discussing that further at the FAC. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay, be safe and excellent in all we do. And I will scroll this down because I only see part of the screen. Fortunately, no lost time accidents or incidents in August. That's good. No cyber incidents. Drew and his team and then Elizabeth and her safety team are ticking through all of our requirements for cybersecurity controls. Really appreciate how on top of this Drew's team is for cyber. So we are doing a lot of work in that regard that both involves the computer side aspect of cyber, but also the physical side. As you can see, that policy to update and clarify physical security boundaries is one of those. And that, Holly, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. I just wanted to make a comment that if you haven't seen the video about celebrating IT month or IT day or whatever that the staff has put together, it is such a great communication. And I really love how you talk to each one of the staff members and they say a little bit about what they do. And it was just well done. And I really enjoyed it. And I passed it on to my networks. And I think Tracy was a little bit modest at the end compared to what she does. But other than that, was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Holly. Thank you for seeing that. We're not sure who sees those things, but yeah, we like to celebrate our employees because they do a great job. And the IT people seem to be very quiet, Drew. Okay. Achieve 100% regulatory compliance. We are on target for that. Again, we have a great team with Elizabeth, her safety person and compliance manager is constantly following and making sure we're meeting our we have monthly obligations for safety training. This month was fire extinguishers. Didn't know so much about fire extinguishers. John Lee, it's almost like a science experiment, which one to choose. So appreciated learning those things. So we're on track with that. And then let's see, Western United completed scheduled inspections of our hotline jumpers. So that's good. And we continue just to go through as much data as possible. Again, Drew's team is really great about gathering data and helping us to understand that. So this one, we did ask our employees for feedback on that safety day that I talked to you about last month, and it's a resounding success. So we will likely be doing those in the future. So that's been great. And then we just throw in some pictures. This is where our line workers are outside because we are really trying to ramp up our education and training since COVID kind of stalled that out. So the next 4 months, Jerry actually told me yesterday that the guys are like, oh my gosh, there's so much training, but that's great. So we're really ramping that up as much as possible and bringing outside trainers to the company so we can get our most efficient use. Kohler.
Yeah, just stepping back just a little bit, but on that, where you said we updated the policy to clarify physical security, is there an issue that came up as far as who was allowed access to the equipment? Or is this just something that you do periodic basis or something?
Kohler, I caught part of that. Is anybody else having problems? Is that just my speaker? You are too? Kohler, I think you said something about the physical security and something getting blocked. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was correct. I was wondering if there was an issue that brought that up or if that's just a periodic update that you do.
Drew, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. That is something that we review. There's a handful of policies that we review annually and just make sure that they're still appropriate and make adjustments as needed. So no incident or anything.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll move on to keep the lights on. All right, so complying with our wildfire mitigation plan. So we're deploying network equipment as we have been doing the whole year. And I think hopefully everybody's seen our communications on red flag days and how we are working with our equipment to make sure that we turn those to certain settings when we do have red flag days. So that's been successful. And again, we've tried to really push out communication on that. Change out 5 poles, completed 2 Raptor protections. We usually see bigger numbers on the pole replacements, but that's because Jerry, Garrett, and the crews have really been working on customer jobs as of late. And so we'll go back to hitting maintenance pretty hard the next couple months as well. But this is a cool picture of a Raptor protection device on one of our systems. And then as of July, we're 50%, 56% through our capital project. So that's on track. The crews are working as hard as they can to get as much work as completed before the snow falls. So it really depends on when the snow falls, how far we can get through our capital budget. But so far they're working really hard and very efficient. Rachel, did you have a question on that?
I did, and I apologize. We may have talked about this in the past. I just couldn't find notes on it. For some of our single phase line that, these would be very isolated instances of a place where we've got like 10 miles of single phase going out through the forest that's going to one site, Have we ever looked at kind of an analysis of, and I don't even know if this is possible, but of moving those folks to like a little mini self-contained unit as opposed to maintaining all that line and kind of incurring that fire risk?
I mean, that's a great question. What comes to mind is what Dan and the team have been doing down and thinking about Pagosa. But Jan, do you want to answer that?
Rachel, a great example of that was Upper Blanco off south of Pagosa. There's a long single phase line that goes through miles of Forest Service before it hits a pocket of private property. And that was a great example of one that we did look at to say, what would it take to run that with energy storage and solar and, considering maintenance and all those things. Although technologies change every day, at the time we looked at that, it wasn't viable. We could have solved it for today, but then it would have no room for growth. So we take all those things into consideration, and I haven't seen one pencil out yet, but I think the time's coming.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple things following up on what Dan said. That would be considered a microgrid, right? That you're talking about, Dan?
Actually, what Rachel was talking about was just, off the grid type system. Yeah. It wouldn't be tied to the grid.
Yeah. Okay. My question was on the Vallecito project. So are we doing? Is there a lot of potential for these, undergrounding in these remote areas, or is this a special case? I guess this is I hadn't seen many of these kind of remote areas where we're going underground.
Yeah, Dan or Jerry, because we had this big discussion after the wildfires in Hawaii. So yeah, we actually did take a pause and rethink some of these. So Dan, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, great question, Joe. We are looking at that. We're looking at the wildfire intensity maps, combining that with the projects that we're looking at. Some of the areas that we historically thought would have been prime wildfire areas maybe aren't as high, and others are higher. So this is a case where we did do that because one, we had an opportunity with the county road also, or the Forest Service and county also grading that road, so it worked out real well. Other factors are considered: how many times we cross a river, terrain, a lot of those things. we have definitely come up with a policy of heavy vegetation management in areas at a minimum. And then we evaluate if the economics also work out to put it underground. Everything considered, but it's definitely part of the calculus now. And
Great.
Jerry might have more to add, but.
All right, thank you. Okay, so responded 59 planned outages. That's actually very consistent to the past 3 months. So nothing big there. Obviously, we've had some strange weather come in as of late. But Tim, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about the large Durango Loop transmission line outage.
Mhm.
I wasn't around, and I was just curious what the cause was and how many were affected by that.
Yeah, Dan, do you want to talk about that? Or Jerry?
Yeah, Jerry, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, it was just much like the last storm that we had this past week. Just extremely high winds that came through very short period of time, but we had a tree branch fall out of a large cottonwood that was well out of our right of way. It just broke the branch and blew it into the transmission line and tripped it out. And transmission outages can usually be restored fairly quickly because it's just substation to substation that we have to patrol. So we were able to energize as we patrolled and ended up finding the issue, cleared the tree branch, got everybody back in.
Yeah, and thank you, Jerry. That brings up just one point I wanted to make because we're putting a high emphasis on member communication during outages. And one of those is that we send you get the text that you're out of power personally at your home. And then if we've decided that if the power is going to be out longer than an hour, we'll send another text to that area that is out explaining, potentially what the problem was if we find it. And then once your power comes back on, you will get another automatic text. But we'll continue to we've decided we're going to continue to try to text out updates. And then after the storm, like what happened yesterday, the day before, is that our staff send out an email to those members that were out with an after action report. So we've gotten a ton of feedback from members saying thank you, that amount of communication is outstanding. So just wanted to make sure folks know that when you're affected, you get multiple touch points. So if any of you on the board have had outages, give us feedback if you think we should be doing something different or additional, or what else would help, because that's always very helpful to get that type of feedback. Okay.
And just real quick, did that outage take down a lot of stuff within Durango and commercial and so forth?
Jerry, do you want to?
It was from Bodo Park all the way up to Trimble.
Wow.
Yeah, and we did so some of our staff did contact some of our larger entities, like we have a direct line into the school districts and others, just to kind of have that direct line of communication, just to let you know, Tim. So that's also very helpful.
Yeah, well, okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right. Move to source clean local power. Dan and his team, they're working on Sunnyside, as we've mentioned before. So we should be starting construction in either late September or early October. And then, as we've discussed, we're working with several other local generation opportunities to look at studies and evaluation. And then on the three-pronged strategy, as we mentioned before, we have hired a third party to investigate some of the options for us. So we have the report and we have these consultants, which are FTI. They will present findings in executive session. So we'll talk more in detail about these two topics. Okay. I just keep scrolling until I see a hand, so feel free. Okay, be a trusted community partner. Joe, did you have a question?
Well, go ahead and go through this one. It's a question about this slide, so I'll let you
Okay.
finish.
So one of the targets was create training and education. So again, our staff did a great job of providing that STEM education opportunity at the fair. And then we were a premier sponsor at Archuleta County Fair. So trying to really use those touch points to get out and discuss with our members and educate them on things like beneficial electrification, electric vehicles. Let's see, survey to survey improvement. The member services team in Durango and Pagosa, we've been collecting data for all the walk-ins just to see what's the reason they're coming into the office, to see if we can better serve them in different ways. So we're working on that. And then increase self-service and communication options for members. Again, member services is working with IT to really look at areas to optimize our cloud-based phone system and potentially give additional options for members so that instead of just waiting on hold, you can press an option for a callback. So I know I really enjoy that option with other entities. And then what I'm trying to do as well is sprinkle in other items that are notable for the work I do, because it's really hard to actually add something about I'm speaking at a conference or I'm teaching this or presenting here to these targets. So I'm adding them to pages that I think are semi-related. So last month I was the keynote speaker at this leadership conference, and then I moderated the panel on how to elevate women in leadership, purpose-driven empowerment. So felt very fortunate to be asked to do that at this one. Okay, Joe?
Yeah, on the member survey satisfaction metrics, what sort of services are people asking for? They ask
Great question. Yeah. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
So I mean, Elizabeth, do you have any preliminary? We just kind of really started doing this. I mean, I know that a lot of people are coming to pay in person. So we're trying to figure out, to help them so they don't have to come in, would it benefit members to allow for them to pay online through like a bank transaction, like what other entities do. So yeah, we are collecting that data. I am more than happy to share that when we finish gathering it.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering if they want better pizza delivery or what is it that they want for service. I love that you're doing the callback thing on the phone calls. That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yep, you bet. Rachel.
Yeah, I was curious if, I think what you're speaking to, is it the same as the 2023 member survey that is mentioned in the financial report?
I'm sorry. So on the target?
Oh, there's just, I had a question about, my original question was going to be, there's a 20, in the financial report, it says something about, we launched our 2023 member survey this month. And I was going to ask what the strategic, like, in addition to just kind of standard questions we always ask, if there are any new strategic information we're trying to gather to help inform some larger strategic goals or gather information on specific areas, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Actually, the survey's done. We're waiting for NRECA to kind of finalize stuff and give us that report. So we'll send that out to the board when that's done. And then I'll present that probably at the next board meeting, the findings, or we'll send a memo out. But we did ask, so definitely demographic data is in there. The typical data NREC wants to send out for customer satisfaction. And then we added additional questions related to beneficial electrification and renewable energy. So basically, if you had the opportunity to install electric heat pumps or water heaters or vehicles, how many of you already have done that? And what's the potential going forward? And definitely questions around do you want LPEA to work on renewable energy? What kind of renewables? Those kind of questions. Yep. So we'll make sure you get a copy of those.
Awesome. And I know we've talked about this in years past, but thinking that our board is headed into some strategic planning, I believe it's scheduled for some time down the road. Would this be a good tool or opportunity to, I think maybe help inform that process, and thus maybe during the design phase of the survey, like, hey, is there anything y'all are curious or seeking member input on? I can't remember if the NRECA one's flexible or if it's something like they give us 2 questions that aren't standard.
Yeah.
And thus it's better to do something in-house. If
They really limit the questions we can ask, and actually you have to pay additional money when you go over. So in this case, we felt that this is really strategic of knowing our members' desire, because then it helps inform our electrification programs and those kind of things. So staff really wanted to hear that, but no doubt in the future, we can definitely open that up.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Holly.
Yeah, that conversation made me think about something I saw in the community. My dad was looking for a Toyota, so I pulled up the local Toyota website, and it has a pop-up about an upcoming EV drive event coming up, and just, how likely are you to buy an EV? And, it was just kind of an interesting little pop-up for me. And so I don't know if you've seen it, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
Yes, if that one's at the Ford Motor Company, we're a sponsor of that, and we'll be there. And yeah, David Lucian also alerted us to that as well. So appreciate that, Holly. Okay, great. Move on. Okay, Patrick's gonna cover this slide. Go ahead, Patrick.
Hey. Hello, everyone. It's my first meeting, so good to see you all. I'm just getting my hands wet in this whole endeavor and taking a top look. Things look good. It's been a good year, and August was no different. Margins look good, and it's primarily we've had, maybe it's good or bad, but the weather had all to do with that. And I would say generally the expense side of the management equation has been healthy. It's expenses look like they've been managed well as far as I can see. Cash reserves, this is something that we're looking into. Jessica mentioned this briefly at the start of the meeting. This is a metric that has some timing variability on how the cash is actually stated and when major bills are due. So this is something that we're going to flesh out and maybe make some proposals in the future to the board. Equity looks good as far as that percentage is concerned. And then long-term debt, as far as its percentage of equity, also looks good. All healthy indicators from a balance sheet indicator and debt load standpoint.
Holly, I see you have your hand up. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just slow.
It's going back down. Fair enough. Back to you, Patrick or Jessica.
I didn't have anything else to add as I've gotten through the list.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on this? Okay. All right. Prepare for the, oh, Tim, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry to be a little late there. Could you remind us about the debt reduction, the 14 million or whatever it was there? Is that somewhat discretionary on our part, or is this based on the I guess the covenants with the lender that we have to retire this in that order? Is there any discretion on our part as to when we make those debt principal payments?
I don't have optics into this yet, Tim. This is something that's on my to-do list, whether this was a voluntary pay down of debt or not. I don't know if Jessica might be able to add some color, but I can certainly, it's on my to-do list to follow up, because I had a similar question as to whether this was just a cash pay down or something else triggered this, but maybe Jessica could add some color to it.
Yeah, I thought we had a schedule on this, so I'll just have to go back to Monica and we can double check and get back to you.
Yeah, I remember at one point a number of years ago, the finance, I think it was before Carl went through and tiered all these somehow. So maybe it's small increments of a large debt that have to get paid off, but it would be good to know how much of that might be discretionary at some point. And we could talk about it in the FAC too, I suppose.
Okay, we'll get that on the agenda and we can split it out, whether it's scheduled principal payments or additional over that. So happy to look into that.
Thank you.
Kirsten.
Yeah, my question is on the appendix part of the financials. Can I ask that now, or do you want to do your last of your dashboard first?
Maybe just get through the dashboard and hit the appendix.
Okay, you've got one more slide.
Scroll.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, and this is our last slide, prepare for the future. This is the same grant information you saw last month, except for the new thing is that the awarded to LPEA, the top one with Trip Saver Resiliency with the Southern Utes. We are continuing on that and having kickoff meetings with the tribes, Department of Energy on these items. So that's good progress. Again, Dan is really and his team are working well on the DR assets. We're over our target, so just keep working on that. And then develop partnerships to achieve the board's broadband goal. We did organize an introductory meeting between LPEA and 2 other broadband developers in the region to discuss partnerships, so we're still focused on that. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm trying to add additional items that I do out in the community. So I did, CREA's managers group asked me to speak at their conference, at their meeting, our meeting last month about lessons learned for V2G school bus. So that's great. I think a lot of the other co-ops are interested in helping their community convert their traditional buses, short buses, long buses over to electric. But there's not really a good place to ask people about that. NRECA doesn't really have any place where you can go to say, okay, this is what you do. This is who you talk to. There's actually a lot involved in this, even a contract with the school district talking about, well, what if the bus breaks down? Those kind of things. So there's a lot involved in partnerships with your community that we found great success because the school districts are coming back and asking for more. So that's great. So we just want to continue to share lessons learned with all the other co-ops. Rachel.
Okay. Ooh, well, you just prompted one clarifying question. When you said the school districts are coming back, like our school district coming back and asking for more. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. So if you see under one of the grants, we're, in progress to go after more grants for Clean Bus School Program. And then actually I've met with some of the Colorado Department of Energy people to talk about them going after grants because Colorado State actually has to win the grants. And so we've just made sure they understand we'll take as much money as possible. And so
awesome.
that's been helpful.
Awesome. I ended up going to that SEPA EV training thing yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to hear some of the models that are rolling out for school buses. I'm sure this won't impact rural areas, more so urban areas where there's a better return on investment. But apparently there's third-party groups buying these buses and then offering them as like a service, if that makes sense. So you can lease them. So those companies are taking on the capital expense up front and then recouping costs. My question was a little bit around the USD New Era program and the 25 megawatt solar gen. Is that to support Sunnyside or is that something else?
Dan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, Rachel, that's a completely different project. We did submit an expansion of Sunnyside under a PACE grant. That's the one listed under the top of the pending grants there. This one is a completely different project. We're working with one of our community partners that has some property near an industrial plant where we could install the potential of 25 megawatts. No storage associated with this project because this grant was all about GHG reduction per dollar spent. But then when the resiliency grants come around again, we'll take advantage of those to work on energy storage coupled with this because there's room for it.
follow-up that's a bit of a strategic question. Because I know Sunnyside was like my understanding, is like our first kind of dipping our toes into the, hey, we're going to build this plant and own and operate it sort of thing. And so this is kind of, sounds like, unless that community partner is one of our local installers, right? That might be a similar model of we own, we operate. And so I'm curious if that is intentionally something we're kind of moving towards, or if we've thought through, is it best for us to own these things? Is it just a factor of, to really win these grants, it's got to be a utility, which I know grants sometimes unintentionally create consequences and structures that aren't the best for the whole, but it's how you get the thing in the immediate.
Rachel, it'd be evaluated on a case-by-case basis while the IRA funding is out there that we can take advantage of, coupled with grant funding. And you're right, for this particular instance, it had to be owned by the utility. So this just all said, yeah, we're going to own and operate this facility. We can contract with the maintenance of it until we have enough to justify our own maintenance department for these types of projects.
Thank you.
Okay, Nicole.
My question is also about the solar generation project. Because I thought we were maxed out for solar projects. I remember last week, kind of two different things, I guess, with community solar. The FERC was saying, or last month, that it was considered a discount and unfair. I just wasn't sure how we were proceeding with this.
Yeah, Nicole, that's another great question. You're correct that we've maxed out. So this would be contingent upon either having more flexibility within our contract. We've got probably 2 or 3 different avenues that we can still explore. We aren't looking at the installation of this until about 2026. So there's still a lot of time for things to happen. If none of that even comes around, the economics on this could be such that we could put it as a qualifying facility avenue under existing policy at Tri-State and still make this work. So there is a door here, but it would only work because we have grant coupled with IRA that get the cost down so low that it even makes sense to do as a qualifying facility.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know if I missed it, but the Trip Saver Resiliency Grant, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, this is one that's been in the works for, I think, a couple months now. This is in coordination with the Southern Utes, but Dan, do you want to explain what this does?
Yeah, Joe, so this goes along with the same efforts that we're putting in with the Vipers. Vipers is another model brand name type of thing. What Trip Savers are is a replacement for a fuse and has a lot of other functions as well. So it's another device that's out there that helps us with wildfire mitigation from the perspective of these can be customized, and the arc is extinguished under a vacuum as opposed to an expulsion fuse. So that helps, and they're called Trip Savers because they will save us trips to the field to turn the power back on. If a fuse blows, you've got to roll a truck out there. These have the ability to act sort of like a recloser does, where it could be programmed to re-energize itself to restore the power under certain conditions and reduce outage time.
And with the Southern Utes, they help us get the grant, or we help them get the grant?
Yep, this was a formulaic grant, and so it was really just apply for it, and it was only applicable to tribes. So they had to initiate it. They came to us and said, "Hey, what can we do? We can get up to this kind of funding. It's a matching grant. Our match on it's like 30%. These are devices we wanted to put in the field anyway, so essentially we're getting a 70% discount to do it."
Okay.
And it's not a huge grant, but we have enough to do 30 or so of these Trip Savers, and it needs to be on tribal lands.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Tim.
Thanks. So just to follow up a little bit on Nicole's question, Dan. So if I heard you correctly, we're sort of acknowledging that the community solar 2% that Tri-State offered is not the basis for going ahead with the sunny side now, given the FERC ruling. Is that correct?
So now we're outside of the grant, anything labeled here, and talking about our existing sunny side, right, Tim?
Yes, I guess so.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we have a couple of different options. Maybe we can discuss during executive session on that we can cover with you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But this grant, we obviously would be beyond that at this point.
Absolutely. This is relying on some time between now and when these projects would actually go in and see where we are at that point.
Same with the new era, if we're.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Kirsten, back to you on the appendix. Let me know what slide.
Yeah, thank you. It's the, I don't know what slide it is. It's the one that talks about the transformers change, just reclassifying. And I just have a follow-up question. I did get the answer that inventory is not depreciated. My question is special equipment where transformers used to be, is that depreciated? So are we taking this from a depreciation account to a non-depreciation account?
Patrick.
That's my understanding. It's basically moved from a long-term asset to a short-term current asset. Inventory is a current asset, so should migrate from depreciation expense into P&L. Basically, P&L expense that's further up on the operating statement, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it'll be it'll be part of our operating margins now, whereas depreciation is not, right?
That's right.
Okay, cool. Do we have any transformers? Are we one of the lucky few in the US that actually have transformers?
Jerry, yeah. I mean, that's because our staff are so aggressive on this.
Yeah, that's great. Well,
they looked
congratulations.
Ahead. Yeah, they were good. And Jerry continues to spend time at Western United, reminding them that we're down here in Southwest Colorado. So that's also been helpful. Okay. Ted, back to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Tim. Sorry.
No problem. So we didn't get a chance to look at the draft balance sheet in the FACs. So now that I've seen it, I have a question here. I guess this is on my PDF. It's page 103, but it's the comparative balance sheet, right? And at the bottom on deferred credits, other deferred credits, there's almost a 4 million increase. And I know that's where we have our rate stabilization fund. But I'm just wondering if that 3.771 million increase from last year to now, is that mostly accounted for through the addition to the rate stabilization fund, or are there other deferred credits that were, I mean, it's a big jump.
I should, I should pre-record this statement. I'm going to have to follow up on that, Tim. That's definitely.
No problem.
I've been living in what I call the P&L, the operational, just to give you a little bit of perspective. I kind of work, at a granular level from the ground up. So I'm going to follow up on that for you. I appreciate the question, as it gets me into something I need to backfill myself on anyway. So hopefully that's okay if we have a little gap in the information.
Yeah, no problem. We could even talk about it if we see again. So that's not a problem. Thanks, Patrick. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. Sorry.
You can put me on the spot all day long. We might, eventually it'll be like punching a dead horse though. So.
And if you send an email on that, can you copy the whole board? I'd like to see what he's saying. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've got a couple of follow-up items with Patrick, and then I'll make sure I send it all the information back to the board. Yeah.
But the financials.
Me too, Patrick.
Yeah, the financials look great, Patrick. So but that's the kudo.
I have very little to do with that. As much as I just should go ahead and take credit. But thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. All these guys have done a great job. I'm impressed with the team here, so they get the credit.
That's
Great.
Thanks.
All right, Ted.
All right, onward. Yeah, so we're agenda item Roman numeral 5, board action. And first item there is update from Finance and Audit Committee. Tim, if you're doing that one. You're on mute, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder there. Sorry. So yeah, we met on the 14th. Everyone was there. The report is in it. We, outside of executive session and open session, we mostly just reviewed the August financials, and those have already been reported here in the board packet. And we put Patrick on the spot several times with questions on that. So, so I don't think there's much more for me to cover, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, most of it was executive session, and if there's questions there, we can take them up in our upcoming executive session with the board.
Okay, not seeing any hands for Tim. And then just an agenda reminder that we removed A1 on the net metering tariff from today's agenda, which moves us into agenda item B, Committee on Policies update. John Lee, will you handle that one for us?
All right. We were going to put policy 105, 6, and 7 in the consent board items, but to give us an opportunity to have a few more discussion points on it and not have them pulled out. The policy update memo defines it pretty well with some of the changes. You can take a look at the red lines for all 3 of the policies, or each of the 3 policies that Graham prepped there for us. When we're done with this, we'd like to, I think in the policy memo, it gives some verbiage for a motion to accept these 3. We'll continue to work on 108, or yeah, 108 we didn't get to. So if you have any questions, policy 105, 6, or 7. Kirsten?
Yeah. Hi, thank you, John. My question is kind of about all 3. So these were all kind of word changes, I forget how you put it, non-confrontational or non-substantive changes. I'm super interested in, I know we're getting kind of get through the schedule of just kind of getting them to match the bylaws and make the wording correct and such. When we do get to kind of past all that, how do we as board members say, hey, I think we need to relook at this policy, and we need to think about this, and is this the right policy? And really the substantive, the what's the background for this? Why do we need it? What are we thinking we were going to do on that? Or how do we go about that?
Well, yeah, we've got a few of these that have the limited substance change to them. My understanding is that we're about to get into, and Ted, you might need to help me with this, but what was some heavy lifting policies that are going to be coming up. And I'm new to that, so I haven't dove into them, trying to stay up on what we're getting ready to put in front of the board. So when we're done with that next set that still needs its initial review from what we started this, a year and a half ago, however that looks, then, if we have some recommendations, if there are some, I guess, concerns or thoughts on it, Kirsten, then while our committee is still formed and active, we'll jump into that next item. If you're talking about like the director education policy, should it be separated or not, that we talked about last month. Those things, we can take a look at as long as our committee is still standing for the board. Ted?
That might,
And,
oh, go ahead.
and this is a permanent committee, right?
True.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
And go ahead.
oh, let me just
follow
add.
up, but I'll wait.
Yeah, let me add just briefly. Yeah, so you're right, Kirsten. It's a permanent committee. You know, we're required to. I might get the verbiage wrong. You know, but we're required to continuously review our policies. There may actually be, hey, Graham, you speak up. If there may actually be a timeline requirement for that, but we are required as a standing committee continuously review the policies. You know, that part's it's a bit like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Once you're done, you better get started again, because you know the ones that you haven't seen for a while are due to be reviewed. The thing I want to I don't know if correct is the right word, but don't misunderstand that as we have been going through all of these policies, that the committee's intent is to just bring them up to speed. Every time we look at a policy, the intent is to make it the best policy it can be now. So, you know, when we get to these ones that are currently on 106, 107, 105, Exhibit A on 105, when you see that the committee recommends sort of non-controversial changes, that by definition means that we didn't discover any controversial changes that the committee would recommend. So we are looking deeply at every one that we look at. And so when they come up, those are certainly opportunities for the full board to say, whoa, let's look more deeply into that. So don't necessarily hold off and say, well, once we get completely through this, we're going to have a different process or another process to identify, again, maybe not proper verbiage, but strategic changes to some of those policies or more far-reaching. Additionally, you know, while we have historically tried to set up a path to get through painting the Golden Gate Bridge, we've always entertained. You know, you're painting the bridge and you find a broken cable. You really need to do something about that right now. And so I'm sure you'll remember there's been various policy reviews, discussions, votes that weren't sort of in the general, let's go from Series 4 up to Series 1, where for a combination of reasons, it was deemed important to solve this policy issue right now. So, and I think those can sometimes come up as just, you know, sort of immediate challenges that need to be solved. But I think they can also rise to the level of importance by general board input. So I think it's kind of incumbent upon policy committee to maintain a list of priorities. Currently, the priority is, I think we have maybe, like 4 really difficult policies to get through that haven't been addressed recently. And that makes them priorities. But, you know, if the board wants to see other priorities, they should bring those up, and Committee on Policy should keep that list. Here are the ones that we're planning on reviewing in the near future. And here are the ones that you know, that it's kind of like an ever-changing priority list based on various different factors. Some of those factors being what this board wants to see evaluated or analyzed at a policy level. So I guess that's my addition, Kirsten, and please respond to that.
Yeah. So my follow-up question is, I understand that I believe you said the intent is, well, when we look at this policy, let's not just look at the words. Let's look at, is this still valid? Have things changed? Do we need to change things? But education came up and it was just a word change, and any discussion about, well, do we need to rethink our education policy was put off. So and also all 3 of these policies that we're looking at now, there was a nice discussion at the policy committee meeting, and it was about the substance, not the words, not just the semantics. so there was stuff to be done, but and this could be my misinterpretation of the intent. I felt that what I heard was, let's just get these words done. We'll worry about the what we're really after later. And I need to understand what later is and how that looks and how we raise that stuff. And I think you're saying, bring it up and it'll go on the list and the policy committee will decide when and if they read it again. And we did just change words and we did not look at the composition. We didn't look at the intent or anything. So I am voicing my concern that we really look at policies and not just cross the T's and dot the I's. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. And I think they're probably, let's see if we can do it, John, but maybe that, it's more of a procedural discussion in the next policy meeting about, how we maintain this priority. What is on the to-do list, other than just we have 4 or 5 more policies that haven't seen first review for some time. Of course, those are on the list, but how else do we define that list and maybe try and address the concern that Kirsten's bringing up about, well, things get tabled, but let's try and make sure they're not tabled indefinitely. So and then if this question, a similar question comes up, particularly about what you mentioned, Kirsten, the topic of director education, Committee on Policies will have a more defined response to that. Here's where we've currently put it on our priority list. And then there can be more discussion about, is it in the right place? But at least then you would know what action was taken on that topic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Does that all make sense to you, John, as well?
Yeah, I believe that we did have in-depth discussion on things needing to change. One of the topics was something that Joe brought up. We talked about it even afterwards, but it was related to our bylaws. And so it was bigger than our committee was going to change and going to have to go in front of members. And we are not, I've had 2 meetings and I don't think we are just doing parentheses and punctuation or something like that. Even though these are coming, forward, 106, 107, and parts of 105 are coming forward that way. I don't think that we are pushing things off. Rachel?
Okay, this might be a chance to practice what Kirsten and y'all were just talking about. I'm not sure. So just in reviewing these policies, there are a couple of things I noticed. The changes y'all made look great. And then I had a couple recommendations to content. So should I suggest those now? And I don't know if they're just taken back to policy for consideration or if we debate them here. But I'll practice and we'll see. And we'll use it as a little case study. Policy 106, these are pretty minor, but one of them it's 106.c-.2. So it talks about how if a employee is running for office, kind of what, if it interferes with their duties, they have to resign from LPEA. I noticed we don't have anything on that similar to the director listing. So I don't know if we need or want some similar guidance for directors if they're considering running for additional public office. That was one little note. And then the other, this one was a heated debate back in the day. But it's later on, and I apologize, I can't shift between all my screens, but it's for reporting guidelines on director campaigns. It has that every contribution $20 or greater has to be noted. And I know we put that in play before our current inflationary event, and it hasn't been updated in a while. And I don't know how burdensome that is on candidates, but that was just something, one thought was, do we want to update that to kind of reflect the true value money for modern times. So those are just two, again, not actually that big of a deal of things, but some recommendations.
Okay. Just checking in here, you know, kind of on procedural, and I think it is, I thank you, Rachel, for bringing it up as sort of an experiment. How are we going to deal with this? The general process here, and maybe we've gone outside of the general boundaries, but our goal here is to try and avoid having wordsmithing conversations at the board meeting level. And we should be providing opportunity for that input along the way. So, you know, policy committee should be making these changes available to the full board for comment. If that's not done, you can take this memo to mean this is what the policy committee is proposing, and we either have to vote yes or no on it. And I apologize if I am missing where, or if we didn't get that in front of the board sort of for proper review ahead of time. But if we don't see that input from the policy committee when the policy committee is deciding what to put forward in front of the board, then we assume that there is agreement. And that's kind of where we are right now. Rachel, you know, we're never going to say don't bring something up, but we want to try and follow, you know, the procedures that allow us to expeditiously get through this process while not eliminating anyone's voice in the process. So if you think these are things that should prevent us from voting yes on these minor changes, then please take that stance. You know, we can still pass it, and we can still recognize those exceptions and suggest that maybe further modifications are needed, or we can agree that they are not major enough to prevent, you know, these three the three items in the motion language from passing through. But I really do want to, you know, make sure we're working hard to not turn this back into let's throw some policies in front of the board and wordsmith them in the middle of a board meeting.
With all due respect, I don't think I'm suggesting wordsmithing. I'm suggesting material changes. And so I think that's the point Kirsten's making. I'm sorry, I turned off my screen because my internet's freezing again. But I think that's maybe where it's confusing, because I support the changes, but if voting yes means great, the changes, if voting yes means, yep, great, stamp the changes, this goes back into the closet for the next 3 years because we're on some rotation. I think what our concerns are is we're missing the point to make material recommendations as a full board to any sort of policy change. And so I think there's a question of in our current process, you know, when does the board, if the policy committee doesn't catch a material change and there's interest in having that, where is that what's it called, check in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And
I hear that, Rachel, and I find it easy to support that position when we have you know, additional meetings. Kirsten came online last time to ask some questions and give some input to it along with the committee. And it's hard for, you know, board members to come back into yet another committee and perhaps not even get asked about it, since there's not a position for it if it isn't with the committee. So I will hear from Joe, and you know, I don't, maybe I can be corrected if it's wrong, but I don't know that this has an expiration date on it. So if if a couple of these comments, or this is the first time that board members are seeing something and we need to take it back to committee, we will. I would rather have it be accurate and, recognized by the majority of the people than to just get it done this month so that we can, get the next one done the next month. If it takes a month or two, but it gives us a good product, I believe that would be an investment worth it. So if that's okay, Rachel, then we'll go with Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, John Lee.
Yeah, and I'm a member of this committee also, and thank you, Kirsten and Rachel, for bringing these points up. I think that it would be helpful from just a process standpoint on our part is if we could, and maybe we can talk about this at our meeting next week, but if we could announce, say in our next board meeting, that we're going to be, the next two policies we're going to be looking at are, 103 and 104. And then that would give everybody a chance to make a note of that and go in and read it as it is. And, it is incumbent on the other board members to read that. And then that might help inform a little bit more and get us comments as soon as possible. I know all of us, are busy and we don't always get a chance to read everything. But so I think on policies, giving, if we can give more advance notice to the rest of the board and what we'll be considering, I think that would be very helpful. Also, this is just kind of a point of order question that maybe Graham can do this, but on the policy, when we introduce the policy discussion here, let's also mention what the policy is. We're considering policy 105, which is political activity or whatever, just because people are watching this and they don't necessarily have that in front of us. So if we could make note of the actual policy that we're discussing and not just throw out a number, because that's even meaningless to me. I've got to go back and say which one is that. And then the last thing is, none of these, like what John said, none of these are essential to the absolute operation of LPEA. So we can, if these things take 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, that's what it takes. And we do want to get them right. And so all I can say is please, stay on it. And if you've got substantive comments, let us know. One of the issues I would like to see more discussion at the board level at a meeting of some of these, because it's not always easy to explain what an issue is that you're having with a certain policy. That it's not always easy just to type that in the little corner or the little comments section on the side of the red line. And maybe again, that's another thing we can discuss at the committee level, because I agree, we're not talking about wordsmithing. Sometimes we're talking about trying to understand concepts, and these are important. And I think these are part of governance that is really in the board's purview that we need to pay attention to. So thanks.
All right, thanks, Joe. Kirsten?
Yeah, we have had a couple of policies that we've put out for redlining and really encouraged everybody to do that. So I think on the really important ones, we have done that. We just need to do something for these kind of in-between folks. I believe we owe Rachel, though, comments on her substantive changes because they were not wordsmithing. Graham, I have a question on 107, and that's the $20 one. I believe that matches what Colorado State requires reporting for anybody running for a Colorado State position. Can you confirm or deny that?
I could take like 5 minutes to try and confirm or deny that. I don't have it off the top of my head. The bylaws just said the bylaws, which is where that originates. Says all candidates running for election to the board of directors shall disclose monetary and in-kind contributions to the director's campaign. The board of directors shall establish a policy setting forth rules of reporting campaign contributions consistent with this provision. So like the $20 doesn't come out of the bylaws itself. That's something that was added in the policy, but is you might very well be right, and it would give me just a minute or two to look that up while maybe some other debate where the vote goes on. I would also say to Rachel, on your other question about prohibiting directors from holding elected office, I reviewed the NRECA governance task force report on this, and they don't typically recommend that because sometimes the candidate pool for rural areas that are served by electric cooperatives are such that you can really end up eliminating quite a few people if you have that on there. They sort of have a more discretionary guide of if it becomes so burdensome that you're not able to fulfill your duties, and then it becomes problematic, as opposed to an absolute bar for directors. That's their recommendation.
So my follow-up on my question, thank you for looking up that $20. We might want to change the wording to match the Colorado one, whatever it is. And the second one, it was substantive, and we addressed that at policy committee, and Graham, you came up with the same point at that time. So that's one of the ones where it really helps to educate the rest of the board of this is why it's not there. So I really appreciate you doing that education for us. Thank you.
All right, Tim?
So I'm ready to make the motion if you want, but I do have another question about policies that I would like to also ask. So just to move things along, I'll make the motion that we adopt the changes to policy 106, policy 107, and exhibit A to policy 105, and reserve afterwards the right to have my hand up for another question. Thanks.
Second.
All right, having moved and seconded the discussion, Kirsten?
I want to propose an amendment to that. I'd like to remove 107 from that, since we don't know about the $20 yet.
I can just answer that right now. Yes, that is correct. That is Colorado state law. Standalone candidates must itemize all expenditures of $20 or more, either one-time expenditures or expenditures greater than $20 in aggregate during a reporting period.
Super. I remove my unseconded amendment. Thank you.
All right, further discussion? Seeing none. All of those in favor of accepting the motion for 105 Exhibit A, Policy 106 and Policy 107, say aye, raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Seeing none. Any abstained? The motion carries.
Hey, John, just for the record, can you just go name each one and say what it refers to?
Yes, Policy 106, political activity. Policy 107, campaign finance. And Policy 105, election supervisory committee guidelines. Thank you for that, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, John. Anything else, John, on policy committee?
No, I guess I guess what I'll do on the wrap up for it is to I will try to find, having two meetings, I just fell into slop with this, and I will work to not bring so much that it seems non-contributory in front of the board. Our meetings were set up for an hour, our committee meeting. And I have run over on that because both meetings that I've had have been completely full, and we'll make sure to put an appropriate amount on our plate for that policy committee meeting in case you're able to join with it, or send an email to us. If you send something to Ted, Joe, and I, or Jessica or Graham or Elizabeth, we've been able to introduce that into our conversation in the committee. And I want to make sure that those voices and those ideas, somebody else's eyes are seeing that. I don't want it curtailed. So we'd be done with that, Ted, unless Tim, he had said he had a follow-on question about policy.
Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Ted. So previously, I think maybe it was Ted said, you know, when it gets to this point, we have a vote, which like we just took. And if you don't agree with it, this is the time to vote no, right? And in this case, we all voted yes. So I guess that's a good thing. But last month on Policy 109, Director Education and Compensation, Insurance and Travel of Directors, there were 3 votes for no, right? And so I guess my question is, when you vote no, is that the end of it? We just wait for this painting crew to come back and paint that part of the bridge again? Or is there an opportunity, and maybe that's similar to the question that Kirsten was asking, I'm not sure. How do we bring back, you know, this topic in a timely manner from those no votes, right? I mean, it's, you know, or do we just live with it like we do any other issue? So I guess that's my question, you know, if yes or no is your only option at this point, and you go no, is that the end of it? We just
it's the beginning of that policy. And yeah, it's not because we have dissension doesn't mean we're going to re-vote on it.
Well, I'm not asking for a re-vote. I would be asking, I'm asking, how do we then improve it? Obviously, there's directors who feel that policy was missing or deficient. And in some of those cases, and certainly in this particular case of Policy 109, there was a lot of input, right? And I know that's a lot of work for the committee to go through. I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong. I'm asking about how or if that presents an opportunity to look at that sooner than the next time you paint that part of the bridge. That's just my question. So it doesn't necessarily need an answer now, John, but I think it's something worth looking at as part of the policy committee. That's all. Thanks.
All right. And I did take that note, Tim, at our policy committee meeting here next week. We'll ask that, look for some guidance from general counsel and also what Ted and Jessica had been working on, you know, the year previous with that. We'll put all that into consideration.
Perfect. Thank you,
Joe,
John.
is yours in reference to policy?
We're going to be discussing 108 on next Monday. Is that correct?
Yes, disclosure of cooperative information.
Great. Oh, and just to quickly to address Tim's, we did mention this in our meeting that we will be looking at that in the future. So it is on our radar.
All right, Joe, Rachel.
Thank you. And we'll see how this goes. My internet keeps freezing. I don't know what's happening. I have all the little bars and I'm sitting right next to my router. So apologies if this gets weird. I wasn't sure if this is a time. I had a couple things I want to share out about the net metering policy. I know we pulled that off the agenda for today, but I just had some great conversations with some of our stakeholders and our members, and know that we're re-examining that. So would love to share some of those insights so that everyone's got that information.
head?
I kind of think since we pulled it off the agenda, that, you know, that should probably not happen in this meeting. And I guess feel free to share those things via email and offline. And I think, you know, Jessica is committed to bringing back a new proposal, and we will have discussion on it at that time. I know it's important, but I just don't know that it fits in today's agenda.
Okay, I will send an email.
And yeah, and just, you know, to all the board, you know, I think this is important discussion, and I'm not trying to eliminate the discussion at all entirely. I think there will be a future time for it. I think it's super poignant that, you know, that staff did choose to pull this from the agenda, and it means that it does need further discussion, and we will have time for that. Board, please look for conversation specifically from Rachel and from anybody else who wants to continue that conversation offline.
Yeah, I think the biggest theme of my conversation was there's a need for discussion and input before things get presented. So that's what you'll see coming from me.
Tim.
Yeah, just to that point, the FAC has looked at this twice, so that's an opportunity for other board members who can attend the FAC meeting to hear what is gone on. It was on those agendas, so that's one opportunity. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but I think we also discussed about this perhaps being a topic at the COW budget session as well. So there may be another opportunity there for the whole board to talk about this.
Yeah, and I'll just remind the board that Dan also gave a lunch and learn to the board on this. He's also met with the solar installers several times. So it's actually been a lot of feedback and input. I just want to make that clear because my staff spends a lot of time and works really hard on this. And so it's important to acknowledge their efforts on this. And yes, I think we're getting some last minute comments again, because it does get frustrating for staff when we meet with the solar installers in a room and then get kind of late comments. That's okay. And we're going to take them. And that's why we're pulling the agenda. But there was a lot of opportunity for input on this one.
Thanks, Jessica.
All right, that concludes the Committee on Policies update. We'll yield our time back to the board.
Great, John. Thank you very much. Just a bit of a agenda and time check. I believe we have Jessica confirmed for me that you know, per our current schedule and Matt's time, we have him coming on at 10:40, and we need to respect that and get him, you know, in front of us. I think if it's okay with the board, we'll kind of shuffle. Let's see, where are we at? We're at board action items C 1 and 2. I think we need to postpone those until at least after the attorney update, but probably after executive session. Is there any objection to that? Okay, I don't see any. Then we sort of have an opportunity here to hit our break at 10:30 and come back at 10:40 for attorney update. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Please be back at 10:40. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into attorney update and take it away, Matt.
Great, thank you. So a couple things I want to briefly talk about, and then we can head into executive session. You'll recall there's kind of two ongoing cases at FERC that relate to the contract termination payment. Number one is the contract termination payment and the formula itself. The second one was the withdrawal agreement that Tri-State attempted to file after the commencement of the tariff case. On the withdrawal agreement front, FERC rejected that filing. Tri-State has appealed that into the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. They also filed a reconsideration to try to get FERC to essentially change their mind. That was rejected about a week ago. So that case now is fully done at FERC, but for the pending appeal. So that remains, out there. Number two, on the CTP case, the actual formula case itself, there's no decision yet on that case. It is not agended for, tomorrow, which is actually the next FERC open meeting. It remains unclear as to when that will be agended. There's been, some letters and motion practice in front of FERC trying to implore FERC to issue a final decision on that, but nothing has yet to occur. So those are two things. The third update, Tri-State filed an unexecuted withdrawal agreement with United Power with FERC. So that is now pending in front of FERC. In terms of how the actual exit payment is dealt with in that agreement, it is whatever the value is as of April 24, 2024. So it basically is an agreement, but it doesn't have the money in it, so to speak. And that is now pending in front of FERC as well as United starts to take steps to move towards its exit, at the beginning of the summer next year. So that's the update on the FERC side. Can certainly take any questions. I know we have executive session and you'll have time constraints as well.
Joe Lewandowski, go ahead.
Excuse me. Maggie said, what is unexecuted mean?
Right. It's just the form of the agreement. And that agreement now is pending in front of FERC.
Rachel, I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Can you refresh my memory? The first case still open at FERC, the withdrawal. Which one was that about?
So that was where Tri-State had attempted to make a filing that would have created a requirement to execute a withdrawal agreement upon, when you come up on your date to leave the system. That was not accounted for in the initial tariff. That was opposed by some of the members that have already filed unconditional notices of intent to withdraw. FERC ended up agreeing with the members that had opposed it and said that could not go forward. What you're seeing on the United side, and it is unclear to me whether they've worked on that agreement together or not. Couldn't tell that from the filing necessarily, but you're seeing the specific agreement for United, which, as I understand it, has some interrelationship with what Delta Montrose had to sign when they left.
Tim.
So would that unexecuted agreement become a template for others, do you think? Is that why they submitted to FERC?
Yeah, I think, they ended up having to get approval of the agreement for Delta Montrose as well. So I think they're trying to get ahead of that and start the steps of, and I think what it shows is that, this exit is going to happen. The only thing that's not clear is what's the value that's going to be paid to exit. So I think they're, starting to take steps to do that.
Kirsten.
Yeah, Matt, Tri-State did something about all of their bylaws or their revamping and such. Is that in reaction to the I guess it was the United thing in the county where the county said, and you did it wrong, so you have to fix it?
I believe that it is. And I think we should talk about that a little more in executive session.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Matt prior to going into executive session? I see Rachel's hand.
Yeah, Matt, any updates for the public on the Adams County court case?
No, there's a mediation that was ongoing, and my understanding as of right now is that case is going to trial.
Okay, I don't see any more hands. We should probably have a brief discussion about Kohler's participation as we usually do.
Yeah, I would say we should probably not have Kohler today, particularly so I can talk a little bit more about Kirsten's question.
And then let's see, and then to you, Jessica, we have the three-pronged strategy update also in executive session. What are your thoughts, and maybe even Matt weighs in on Kohler's participation in that part of the discussion?
Yeah, we've discussed this with the FTI, and because there's also strategy within that document, Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, but we feel that Kohler should also be removed and not attend that portion.
I agree.
Okay, and just for clarity and for Kohler's sake and clarity, the employee matter that's listed in executive session, I will clarify what it is, but there won't be discussion on it in executive session. So there's nothing to miss there. I'll clarify that with you, Kohler, separately. But to that end, I don't think there's anything in the executive session that it seems that Kohler can participate in. So we'll, oh, I see Tim's finger up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Tim did add to the agenda. That's right. So
Broadband.
yeah, the broadband update. Thanks, Kohler. So let's actually, when we go into executive session, let's actually tackle that first. And then we'll let Kohler dismiss himself after that. Kirsten, comments?
Yeah, I would assume the answer to the Adams County is for Kohler too, because that's all public stuff, right? It's not strategy, it's not legal strategy. Matt?
In terms of my response to your question,
Yeah.
I would prefer to not have Kohler given what my opinion is.
I think, I mean, my impression, Matt, is that you gave the update on, the public update. What is happening with the Adams County case? You replied, I think, to Rachel on that, and that was the public version of that update.
That's correct. In terms of what my legal opinion is, how that ratification interacts with the summary judgment, I don't, given Kohler's status as a dual director, I don't think we should risk that.
Okay. Okay, so Kohler, you're sticking with us for the beginning, and then we'll let you out. Anything else before we go in? If not, I don't see any hands. We need a motion to go in. Go ahead, Kohler.
I'll move the motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Thanks. Moved and seconded to go into executive session. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor of executive session?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we'll go into executive session. We'll leave the public session. I'll stay on here for a second. Anyone, make sure you have your link, and we'll see you over there in 1 minute. Welcome back, everyone. We're gonna loop back up the agenda to the section that we missed, but before we do that, I was gently reminded that there are a couple of new faces, potentially unfamiliar faces to everyone on the board that are participating in the meeting today. So I'm gonna jump to the conclusion that they're staff, and I'm gonna turn this over to Jessica. Let her do some introductions on new faces.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. Thanks to Dan Huntington for saying, who are these people? I appreciate that. So yeah, Amanda Anderson in the sunny spot on the screen. Looks like a halo. Yep. So Amanda is our new communications strategic officer. So very excited. I think I shared a little information about her with you before, but we stole her from Purgatory Resorts, where she headed up quite a large team there, actually. So all of communications, including IT. So her and Drew can get together and talk technology, computer stuff. So I was super excited to have Amanda, and what I really appreciate is that we kind of threw her into the mix right away with some of these major storms, and she's already familiar with fast and furious communications, just because we know the ski area has a lot of situations that are positive and negative at the same time. So she's experienced with that. And then Patrick Barry, who already presented. So we're super happy to have Patrick as well. And he joins us from heading up financial, the organization up at Telluride Ski and Golf. And he was there for quite a long time as well. Same with Amanda at her spot. So very excited. I don't know, I like to ski, so it's kind of fun to have 2 more skiers on the team. And outdoors enthusiasts, but it's also great to have locals. We feel very fortunate to have locals. We call Telluride sort of local, Patrick, but it's nice that these folks already know the area, they know the membership, and so that's always helpful. So there you go. Thanks for the introductions.
Yeah, no, thanks.
No snowboarders?
Oh,
All skiers?
I mean, if you want to snowboard, I used to snowboard, Kirsten. I still have it.
Okay.
I think they're both skiers, but I could be wrong. Amanda?
True. Yes.
Did you say people from Telluride were loco?
Loco?
Or local? I'm okay.
I mean, you could say loco, but
Thanks.
I'm a recovered telemarker if you consider telemarking skiing, so.
John?
okay, thank you very much for that, and definitely welcome to Amanda and Patrick, and we are also, I think, very happy to have you aboard and happy to get to know you over the course of time, and to lean heavily on the expertise that you bring to the organization. So given that, yeah, thank you, Holly, and we'll circle back. So we're board action item C on the agenda. And we're talking about meeting schedules and election and annual meeting schedules. I guess I would prefer not to drive this if someone else will put their hand, either Jessica or Graham, but we do have a explanatory memo in the board packet.
yeah, we're happy to answer questions. This was a tough one because Tiffany really only gave us 2 weeks for the entire year because I think there's huge elections coming up. And so we're trying to fit it in. And, I think we also wanted to be cognizant and listen to the board and think through is there a different structure where we could get more members? And what we're finding is that, a lot of people work and noon is a good time because they can take a break. And so we thought that was a good solution. And we reached out to other co-ops, and then Graham did some research and found that most nonprofits do it this way and it's effective. And so we thought we'd just try it. It'd be nice to try something new and see how it works this year. And then this timing of the board meetings, I understand, we're flexible on the virtual versus non-virtual. Our thought process for that is that, we value safety as a priority, and then also value our employees' diversity and family life and the boards as well. And so got feedback from our employees that, it'd be helpful to move board meetings to virtual during snowy months like December and January, because that is a safety priority. And we especially think of people in Pagosa. We don't like that route. It's a very scary road. And in the winter, it's even worse. And then, just in talking with my employees about the future of our members and who they represent, the directors and employees, we like to create more opportunity for those to have vacations in the summer. And so that was just the thought that we had to help those board members who may want to take more vacations in the summers, but then also be an active board participant, But then also the board members we know that are full-time workers, they have full-time jobs, and then others that have young families. We do have some directors that have young families, and I have staff that staff these board meetings. And while it may not seem like a lot of work, it's a lot of work for my employees to put on an in-person board meeting. It's not just a day, it's way more than that. And the people that actually are managing those are mothers, and they've had a really hard time finding childcare in the summer. And so we're trying to create that space to retain good staff and employees and try to find the middle ground. So I'm not sure if this is the best answer, but we thought we'd see how it goes.
Thanks, Jessica. Procedural question, and Granny might have to think and help me on this, but in the memo, we go down to motion language, and it appears we have two separate motions. Does it seem reasonable? Do these live separately, or do they need to live together as one?
I tend to prefer to not do compound motions if possible. So even though I wrote this sort of as one sentence, it's probably best to break it up into approve the resolution and then set the annual meeting. That way it'd be cleaner record.
And to slightly clarify that, the resolution is entirely revolves around the board meeting dates and location, if you will.
Yes, so we're required to set the board meeting dates by resolution. And so that's what the resolution 2023-11 is. And then we're also required to set our annual meeting no less than 6 months ahead of time. So based on Tiffany's window, we would still have an opportunity to come back and reconsider this matter in October if we needed to. That's why we brought it now. But we really, by the time we would get into November, we'd start to miss part of the very few dates that she has available if this were to be acted on at the November meeting.
Okay, that answers my procedural questions. And I'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions or comments about the motions that aren't that haven't been made yet. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks. So I mean, I'm happy to make a motion about the timing of the annual meeting. However, I'm not sure how an annual meeting and a board meeting on the same day works, because there's a possibility of new board members who need an orientation. It's also the case that there would, at that first board meeting after an annual meeting, we typically set the officers, and those who might be interested or whatever might not even know if they're going to be on the board. It just seems like it interferes with the board business to put these two close together. So with that caveat, it seems like the May 22nd for the annual meeting is prescribed sort of by outside factors. So I would make the motion that we have set the 2024 annual meeting for May 22nd, 2024. And then maybe we have a discussion after that about the timing of the board meetings to accommodate that. So that's my motion, 2024 annual meeting, May 22nd.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Tim, seconded by Kohler, and open for discussion on that motion. Kirsten.
Yeah, my discussion on that, I'm not sure where to discuss it. I guess we can go ahead and, if we wanted to approve this, we could, and then go back to the board meeting schedule, because that's where more my issue is. So I will reserve my comment for then. Sorry to take the time.
No, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Any other discussion specifically related to Tim's motion about the schedule for 2024 annual meeting? Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor? Say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Any abstentions?
Nicole had a hand up and. then-
Yeah, Nicole's
Oh, I
hand
am.
is up.
I'm sorry, Nicole, speak up. I'm not sure what that was about.
I'm just not, am I in this meeting? Can you guys see me and everything?
We can hear you.
I see your name, Nicole, and I did see your hand after someone pointed it out to me. So I'm sorry I didn't see it earlier.
Well, I'm having trouble getting on, and so I just went through the website. Okay, so now I'm being asked.
I would share with Nicole that I had 3 times coming back from lunch to have to log out and come back in onto the same type of thing. Didn't have a video or audio or something.
Okay, but Nicole, you're here. Are you clear on the motion in front of us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, then let's go ahead and I think I was just looking for abstentions at this point and didn't see any. And then so we'll go ahead and say that the motion on the annual meeting passes. And we'll circle back around to I guess discussion around board schedule and kind of specifically around motion number 1 that hasn't been made. Kirsten, I think if you're ready, you're first in line on that.
Yeah, thanks. I have a couple moving pieces on that. One, as I get the summertime virtual, I kind of get the wintertime virtual, although we do have a February in person. I would still like to see perhaps the October one be also in person. I think we heard pretty clear from several members of this board in the last 2 meetings that the in-person, having more in-person was preferred over more virtual, and that takes us to 7 virtual and 5. I'd like to even it up a little bit more and have at least October moved over. I don't know if that works or not for folks. And then my second comment is about the day of the. So any comments on that? First thing, the making October in person.
I think we just keep, let people comment as they will through this process,
Okay,
but taking your stance on that.
Okay, super. Related to that, Jessica, you said that it's harder to put on an in-person than it is a virtual. I know all the prep that goes into presentations and stuff. Just give me a couple examples of what makes it harder to do to prep for an internal meeting.
Sure, and I can have Janelle jump in, but we have to secure food. We have to bring in safety. Elizabeth talked to me about, just having our safety people at the office to monitor movements. We have to lock the doors. They have to get the tables. We have to have the crews move the tables. Then Drew's team has to be pretty much on call the entire day to make sure that the website's up, that the video is working. We constantly have people complain about in-person meetings, being able to hear the meeting. And so his team is basically always monitoring that, and it's not just him. So it's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. It's and I don't want to say that's so much the problem, Kirsten, but it's also, we're really trying hard to meet our employees where they are, and our employees have also expressed a push for DEI initiatives, and that includes supporting what happens in the summer where they just don't have childcare, right? And so Janelle's a big part of this meeting. She takes the notes. She's got 3 young children. She can't find childcare during the summer often. And she's also the one person with a few others that have to really set up these meetings, be in person. It's a lot more difficult.
Okay, thank you for that information. My second point is about having it the same day as the annual meeting. My question of that is, it seems to me we kind of had some, what do they call it, lame ducks last year or maybe the year before. We went almost an entire month before folks were seated, and it seemed that was problematic, and I'm not 100% remembering why. Does anybody who was in that position remember why, or share that memory with me? Yeah. All right.
I mean,
Thank you.
Kirsten, I'd say that we did have sort of a long lag between a board meeting. I believe we had like the board meeting on, I'm gonna not remember it exactly, so I'm not gonna speculate what it was, but it was almost a month. And we had it took that long to get the new directors seated, so they typically, under our bylaws, a director doesn't become officially the director until they've attended their first meeting. And so if we have the first meeting immediately after the election, that we don't have that sort of lag where we sort of are in a no man's land with our directors. I believe even though we did have some directors that didn't run for re-election this year, we were able to, I think, get the meeting a lot closer to the election. I think you're actually talking about 2 years ago. I think it was where we had the real long lag, that it was starting to seem problematic with committee assignments and intermediate actions. Is that right?
It was the committee assignments that got to be a problematic. So are we suggesting that the board meeting is immediately following the annual meeting, or is it immediately before? Because we have to have one before in order to get the people to vote yes on the members, and then we'd have to have a real one afterwards.
Exactly. It would sort of be like, it would be convene, first order of business, admit new members, then adjourn for the annual meeting, then reconvene, and the actual sort of business section, if you will, of the board meeting would occur after the election.
Thank you.
And so just for sort of example, with my experience, most of the nonprofit corporations I've worked with, been a part of and represented, have operated this way. I mean, I understand that it isn't the way we've operated recently, but is not atypical to have either a shareholder meeting in a for-profit company or a member meeting in a nonprofit company and elect the directors, who then immediately go into board session. That's, as a matter of fact, with almost every homeowners association I've ever been a part of or represented, operated that way. So while it's not what we've been doing, it's fairly common within corporate practice.
Thanks, Graham. I'll kick it over to John Lee.
I can support the virtual in-person schedule as put out. At first I was thinking that the May 22nd needed to be separated a little bit, but in Graham's explanation of seeing other annual meetings with shareholders and such happen, it does work. I guess it just would, for me, need to be, a break in that annual meeting festivities and reconvene in our regular location or another location, realizing that we might have 50 people dribble in behind us, which is great. They would be able to see that meeting in person, perhaps some for the first time. So initially I was thinking it should perhaps be on the 29th or something later than that, later than the 22nd, but I can support the mix and the 22nd if we have some separation in it. Thank you.
Appreciate that, John. Dan Huntington, you're next in line.
Yeah, it'd be very hard for us to have a meeting with the annual meeting. I haven't been to any meeting that haven't had an executive session, and have all the members that want to attend and kick them out. My suggestion would be, I don't see a big problem with doing the June meeting in person and seat our new directors. Most of your water boards who are appointed by judges, the directors are appointed by judges, and you're required to serve till you're appointed and then go into the next director's meeting. I don't know, maybe there is a problem of having 4 weeks there of directors, but they could get orientated and have more time to give staff more time to be able to get them up to speed and with the president and whatnot. So anyway, I can't see us having, we can have a meeting with reports, but it wouldn't be a full-blown decision-making meeting, in my opinion, because you'd have people wanting to comment on the discussions of motions and whatnot. So anyway, I'd like to see the June one go in person and have it a regular board meeting, and then the May meeting would be just the annual meeting, and we wouldn't have a full-blown board meeting in May.
Thank you, Dan. I guess I would just hopefully make a clarifying comment on that that all of our in-person meetings, the public is invited to attend those. I don't think if we were to do a in-person meeting, later in the day or just after the annual meeting, I don't think we'd handle it any differently. I mean, certainly, like John Lee said, there might be more people who might attend just because they're there. That's not necessarily the case. They wouldn't be considered a part of that meeting. They could attend as the public. In any in-person meeting we have, and you're correct, Dan, that we almost always have executive session. We would have to kick the public out for that executive session, and we do that. Although it hasn't happened recently because we haven't had a lot of public in-person meetings. But no different than in a virtual meeting when we sign off and sign back on. So, I really do think we could handle a real meeting, a regular business meeting later in the day after the annual meeting procedurally. Now, I'm not putting my, I think it's fine, but that's not my, I'm not putting that stance up there. I'm just trying to make sure that it's clear that I think we could do that. Back over to Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you. Dan, for me, one of the reasons to not wait till June for officers is because of our standing committees. So they would be basically unstaffed because we wouldn't know who the new secretary is to run the policy committee. We wouldn't know who the new treasurer is to run the FAC. And definitely as fast as things are moving, I don't want to do anything to get in the way of having a good, strong committee meeting. So that's what would prompt me to say, let's not wait till June on that, maybe a week and do it the next week or something. But definitely I wouldn't be for moving that to June. I think we could probably do it that same day, possibly do it that same day, although nobody would have any time to be lobbying other people for their positions because we won't know. I may not be voted back in. Tim might not be voted back in. I don't know who else the other person is. Yeah, Ted. So if you wanted to do any lobbying to remain president, you can't really do that until you know whether or not you even got elected. So, I would think. So there is some think maybe delaying, but not delaying a month because it does get in the way of committees. My thoughts.
Ed, can I just
Jessica,
ask-
jump in.
I don't mean to jump the line, but one item, I'm just trying to think of options because these are all great points. Graham, is there a way for the board to host a special meeting? I mean, I may just be muddy the water, but could you also
Yeah, I mean, we could have,
the election, then you break, then you go ahead and have the board meeting with the current standing board members, because as Graham said, you don't have to seat the new board members right away. And then that way the new board members, if they are new, they can see how a board meeting is proceeded, how it works. And then you can even have a special meeting the week after, a quick virtual with the board to designate officers. That may be a dumb idea, but I'm just thinking there could be other ways to do this too.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a May meeting sort of at our regularly scheduled time. And then perhaps have a special meeting before the regularly scheduled June meeting that solely dealt with the election of officers and the appointment of committees, so that it happened quickly. I mean, it might be sort of cumbersome for everyone's schedule to put that in there. I think everybody here recalls that it can take sometimes, hour or two to, I mean, it's not sort of like one of our pro forma, just approve everyone, all of our new members and then adjourn sort of special meeting. It would be a fairly involved meeting, even if it was just to sort of staff the board and not take any other action. But I mean, it's certainly within the realm of possibilities on a corporate governance schedule. So you sort of have your regularly scheduled May meeting, knowing that it would be sort of out. I mean, we've obviously set the annual meeting for May 22nd. And so now you're sort of having a meeting, about 2 weeks or 10 days or so before that. And then you probably need to have a special meeting, probably as close to the 22nd as you could get everybody to attend it.
All right, keep going. Joe.
I just don't see that waiting to elect officers till June is any great interruption. Nothing that's done in any of the committees is mission critical. So I just don't think we should even consider that. But I guess we would have to, notify whoever runs the candidates that win or lose, you got to be there, to swear you in on the 22nd so you can get on the board if you want to do that. I guess my preference would be to stick with the third Wednesday, because I agree with Dan. We always have, some sort of executive session thing, and I think most of the people come to the annual meeting to eat some great food and enter the drawing for goodies. So I'd rather just stick with meeting in May, and then one more step. I'm okay with the 7 virtual meetings. I appreciate that Jessica is paying attention to people who have childcare needs, because that's really important.
Thank you. Thanks for the comments, Joe. Tim, you're up next.
Yeah, I mean, it could be possible to have the board meeting prior to the annual meeting in the morning of the 22nd. The current board members are not, they're still board members, right? Until the annual meeting clarifies whether they continue or not. So we could have our regular board meeting, not do the officers, could approve the member list, finish the board meeting, do the annual meeting, and then come back on the officers, either in a virtual meeting like you just suggested, Graham, or the following month or whatever in June. But I think if we want to combine these two meetings, that's probably the most efficient, maybe the most effective way. You know, to me, the real concern is about similar to what Kirsten said, which is once board members are seated for another term and our next board meeting supposedly, I don't know if that's bylaw or policy, but basically dictates that we need to go to the officers. And I think we need more than coming off of a lunch with all the members and then go into a round robin of picking officers. To me, that doesn't seem the most productive way to handle that. So I would prefer to do that part in a meeting after the annual meeting, but not immediately after. Right? So, and as to the virtual and in-person schedule, I'm fine with that. I think, again, that's showing respect for the employees who support the board work and the governance work. So I'm okay with that. I just wish some of these dates were more on the third. There was a more consistent, it's the third Wednesday or whatever, rather than it moving around all over the place. But that's a minor pet peeve. So thank you.
Appreciate it, Tim. Nicole.
Yeah, I think I would be game for just giving it a shot, doing it this way where we have the board meeting being at the annual meeting. I think that it's an opportunity where people are all together and might as well get some work done too. And, you know, in terms of as a new board member, it felt like it was a couple months before I really understood my roles on the board. So, and I know I missed the first meeting. So, I don't know, I think shortening that window between I'm a new board member, these are the additional responsibilities would be a good thing because it's a lot onboarding on to this organization anyways. So to kind of have an understanding of your commitments is helpful. And I definitely support the breakdown of virtual meetings. Same reason that Joe said, I think it's really good that Jessica's listening to her employees. And, you know, as an employer, we have to think about ways we can be competitive for good talent, and being flexible is definitely an important part of that. You know, even just today for myself, like we're 30 minutes over, so my childcare ran out and they were able to just drop my daughter off at home, versus if I was in Durango, I'd be hustling about trying to figure out what I'm going to do with her next. So I know as a board member, even though I do think some level of in-person is important for those just sidebar conversations and establishing rapport and relationships with one another, you know, it's really helpful for me that a lot of this is virtual. That's it.
I think I'm next. Is that right?
You're muted, Ted.
Me?
Appreciate that, Kirsten. I'm not even gonna repeat that comment. I'm gonna go right on to you.
Okay, thanks. So two things. Yes, I agree that looking at staff concerns, my understanding was staff concerns on childcare during the summer. And we're talking about I was talking about switching an October meeting. We were also concerned about safety concerns during the winter. And I am again talking about changing an October meeting. So I don't want to mix that up. The other concern, the other thing I want to bring up is if committees are not mission critical, then we shouldn't have them. So if we're saying, so Joe, you said it's not mission critical, so it's part of making this organization run. And if that is not our mission, I don't know what is. So I'm challenging you on that there, Joe.
Yeah, well, what I meant by that is if the policy committee doesn't meet, you know, on one policy 1 month, I mean, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying that if we don't meet, LPEA doesn't come to a halt. And if the finance committee doesn't meet, Patrick is not doing his job. That's what I mean. I don't think, yeah. So
Okay, I accept that. I was just challenging those mission critical words because we are all doing mission critical work. Thank you.
Okay. Dan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, a question for Graham. Does the bylaws or policy state that when the election is announced, that those board of directors are seated? Or is there a time limit on when they are seated within X number of days?
Let me take a quick look at the bylaws and I'll get you that answer.
The reason I'm saying that, the old board members, if it's not a critical time, they would still serve on the committees till the new board members are set. So that could go into June and save staff time and stuff for an extra meeting.
Okay, you digging on that, Graham?
Yeah, I'll dig in on that a little bit, but I will say that, that's probably a good example of why Tim's idea that, having the meeting earlier that day is probably a good idea. We do have some time to determine all that, right? We're only required to set dates, not times or even places at this point. And so we can determine that, the date of the May meeting is the 22nd, the date of the annual meeting is the 22nd, and still have plenty of time to determine which one goes first or how we interlace those two meetings. That is not really required, frankly, until we notice those actual meetings.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Thanks, Graham. I was going to sort of point out the same thing. This is all good discussion and we're trying to get to the best working solution. But some of the things are sort of part of part of the proposal and some aren't. And I think if we look at it, we might be able to make a decision here and still leave open some of those details that aren't specifically defined in the decision we're currently making. And then, just to take my, the facilitator hat off and just put my opinion in, I think Jessica and whoever else helped with this has done a great job in putting together a great compromise. I am totally in favor of the mix of the virtual and in person and the reasons for those. And then I'll jump on with Nicole and just suggest, I think we should give it a try. I think it will have to be different slightly to have, potentially new board members coming in and then moving into a meeting in the same day and being considered for, for positions on the board. But it may just require some homework ahead of time. Just like all of the candidates are going to have to be present just in case they become elected. That's different. That's sort of extra homework that might need to be done. But there's no perfect solution to this. And I think the solution that's proposed is workable. And in my opinion, I'd be game to try it exactly as written. Okay, hat off, gavel back. Holly, go ahead.
I couldn't say it better, Ted. I think there's been some great discussion here and I find myself, yeah, Dan, that's a good idea. Yeah, Kirsten, I agree on that. But in the long run, our staff has thought this through. They've worked it out. They've come up with good reasoning for the way it was written. And I would too support it exactly as it is written. Thank you.
Tim, you're up.
So I don't think the resolution as written has stated that we will have a board meeting in the morning or the afternoon, or that we will set officers at that meeting necessarily. So if I read it correctly, it's just this schedule. And so I will make a motion to approve the resolution 2023-11, setting the schedule. And I'll stop there, just comment that we can, as Graham or whoever else said that, we can discuss how we format that prior to actually getting there, but we can set the schedule. You know, things like maybe in October we go in person to Pagosa. We can still make those, right? We could still make those changes as a board if we wanted, for example, right? Things like that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct indeed, right? Our in-person meetings, if you read down this is sort of the middle of the paragraph, or the second sentence of the, or third sentence of the paragraph below the grid. In-person meetings will take place at the headquarters building of La Plata Electric Association Incorporated in Durango, Colorado, or at such other place within the service territory of the cooperative as the CEO in consultation with the president of the board of directors may select, right? So if you look at the grid, it just says virtual or in-person. Sort of if we don't name a different location, right? It could be anywhere set by the CEO and the president of the board of directors. And so you are absolutely right that all we're really doing right now is picking dates and sort of a preliminary and an intention to have virtual or in-person meetings, but we do have a policy on how virtual and in-person meetings can get converted based on exigencies. And also, if you don't mind, while I've kind of got the floor, I'll speak to Dan Huntington's question. Dan is, in my corporate law experience, generally right that directors serve until their replacement is seated, right? Our bylaws don't actually say that. They say that they will our directors will serve a defined term, which is until the annual meeting 3 years following the date of election, right? So theoretically, if you aren't reelected, you don't, and the next board member doesn't get to come to the meeting until June, we have a vacancy, right? The director's term is completed at the annual meeting, and the new director isn't really seated until they show up at the meeting. So it's not quite the same as a lot of standard bylaws are.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I'll stand down and second Tim's motion.
Thank you, Dan. So moved and seconded to pass the resolution that's in front of us. Discussion, Kirsten.
I would like to offer an amendment to change the October board meeting to an in-person meeting.
I'll second that.
Let's see. Graham, give me a hand with procedurally.
So now we have a subsidiary motion. We would a motion and second to amend the main motion. So we would proceed to discussion on the subsidiary motion to amend.
Okay, so it's essentially a subsidiary motion.
So this is a discussion. We would vote yes or no if we wanted to amend the main motion, right? So my understanding is that the motion is to amend, if you will, the grid on the proposed resolution to change the October 16th meeting from a virtual meeting to an in-person meeting.
Got it. Moved and seconded, and then discussion. And I think Kirsten's first on that.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favor of the amendment. Tim, you had a point that, yeah, we can change all of this later as long as it's done before we notice the meetings. We can change the dates. We can change whether it's in person or not. We can change all that later. What I would like to do, though, by putting it as an October meeting, in person, we do, one, state that in-person meetings are important to us. Two, we do still we still do support staff by not having summer virtual and in-person meetings, and we still talk about safety for the winter meetings. And 3, it's just something else, one other thing we don't have to change later. So if we just get changed now, and then it'll be only the exceptions we deal with instead of something that some of us wanted back in September of 2023 now. That's why I'm speaking for the amendment.
Thank you, Kirsten. Let's go to Joe.
Yeah, just a question. So we have an in-person meeting. I don't have the thing in front of me. Do we have an in-person meeting in September and October then?
It would be September and October and November would be in person.
All three, we'd have 3 in a row in person.
3 in a row in person, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this amendment? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. And just to clarify, Kirsten, and if I get it wrong, correct me, but the amendment is just to change the location of the October meeting from virtual to in person.
Yes.
Okay. That's the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
I have 3.
Three.
All opposed?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed.
Yeah, I got 6 also. Abstentions?
Dan Huntington
I see Dan.
abstains.
Okay, it looks like the motion did not pass. No amendment. We can revert to discussion on the main motion. Tim's motion to approve. Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, fully 1/3 of these are outside of the 3rd week designator, and I'm asking, did we look at changing it? It's hard to do 2nd week because of financials. Is there some other day or some other week that in general will hit more of it so we can be, yes, it's the 3rd week, I must be in Durango or I must be on Zoom?
Kirsten, we were actually very thoughtful on these dates, and I know Tim has brought this up too. It avoids NRECA's national conference. It avoids the CREA conferences. Why we moved him out of the 3rd week was intentional so that staff and the board could attend these very large, important meetings. Otherwise, we will be missing all of those.
Right. My question, did we look at changing our meetings to the 2nd week? Because we stayed above in that paragraph. We have it the 3rd week except for, and then we immediately have 4 exceptions. Did we look at the 2nd week and then there might be an except for, but is it fewer exceptions?
It's fewer exceptions if we're able to shift it to a different week. It works better most months to have it the 3rd week, like we have it. But for those that had, it was less movement to move them out of the 3rd week on certain months, if that clarifies it. Does that make sense, Kirsten? Sorry, it's.
I think you said having it the 3rd and then making exceptions isn't any more exceptions than it would have been if we have it the 2nd week and have to make exceptions.
There you go.
Is that what you said?
Thank you.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
Appreciate
it.
Rachel.
Yeah, I guess if we're speaking equity and participation, that shift is so hard for me when you shift weeks across months, because I have to, like, basically in my schedule, I know keep 3rd Wednesdays clear, no other standing meetings. And when you flip flop back and forth, it is so hard for working, at least for my type of work. So I don't know. I guess I will flag that. I know there's never going to be a perfect solution, but I don't know. Doodle poll?
Appreciate the comment, Rachel. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of accepting resolution 2023-11, say aye.
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 Okay. All opposed?
Aye.
I have 1. And is that you, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, I have 2. And abstentions? None. Okay, motion passes. All right, thank you everyone for the discussion and trying to work together to come up with the best we can do. And once again, appreciate staff's effort in getting this in front of us. I believe we are now at report section. So section 9 of the agenda, first one being attorney report.
Thanks, Ted. I'll just refer to my written report and take any questions.
Okay, anyone for Graham based on his report? Rachel.
What is an I think it said IPU or
IRU.
Three-letter acronym there.
An IRU is an irrevocable right of use. It's basically a long-term lease for fiber. It's sort of an industry term where you sort of where somebody has a long-term access to use a third party's fiber optic cable.
Joe Lewandowski.
Graham, several months ago, we had that issue where landowner was objecting to us, I think, moving a pole. I guess I never heard the conclusion of that. Did that ever go to court or what? It was a right of way on his land, and he didn't like where it was going to be moved.
I'd hate to have to tell you to narrow that down, but I deal with that almost every day.
I think he's talking about the Piedra property over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't heard on that from quite some time. I don't know if I don't think it's caused us any problems in developing our plant as we've needed to. I'm not
okay. All right.
I think I recall the one you're talking about, and I haven't heard on that for quite some time, but yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else for Graham? Moving along, director reports, number 1 roundup. David, Nicole, who's taking this one?
I'm taking that one. So as you can see in the book, we have the roundup numbers, and if there's any questions, Nicole and I could handle those.
Anybody questions about what you're seeing in the roundup report? No questions. On to you, Kohler, Tri-State report.
Okay, there's a report in the packet. I have a few other comments to make, and I'll take any questions you might have. There was mitigation this week between Tri-State and United. You probably discussed it maybe in your executive session today. It didn't really go over that well. We were going to have a special board meeting on Friday if there was progress. They didn't feel there was enough progress, so that meeting was canceled. And I'll have more to say on that after the next regular board meeting. Looks like it'll go to trial, and the trial date has not been set. Also, Basin Electric had their annual meeting, and what was really pretty interesting, and at that time, we still had a director from United on the board, and he also attended that meeting. And the biggest feedback from everybody that attended was that, Tri-State's not a lone dog out there on all the issues it has. It's pretty much throughout the whole industry having the same problems that Tri-State does. So it's somewhat a reassuring thing that, okay, we aren't going off the rails, but.
Hey, Kohler.
Kohler, we can't hear you, man.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Kirsten's having a hard time hearing, and you're a little garbled to me. Can you just get a little closer to your mic?
Yeah, I have it on my head. Hold on just a second. Let me switch it off and go to a different way.
And Kirsten, give us the thumbs up when it's good.
So can you hear me better now? That's good?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like me to start over again?
Yeah,
So-
Kohler, I'm sorry. I missed a lot of that. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Tri-State and United had some mitigation that happened this week. You probably talked a little bit about that in your executive session. The mitigation didn't really go very well. There wasn't much that was accomplished. And we were going to have a special board meeting on Friday. If there was progress, that meeting has been canceled. So I won't have any more to say much on that until after the next board meeting. It will go to court. The court date has not been set yet. So that'll just kind of hang out there for the moment. Also, Basin Electric had their annual meeting, and everybody that went to the annual meeting there, the Basin one, including the director from United that was still on the Tri-State board, came back and their feedback was that Tri-State is not going off the rails. The issues Tri-State has is also very, very common with what Basin did, and also with some of the other G&Ts. So it's a little bit reassuring that we aren't just completely, hitting the brick wall. And Kirsten, you asked about Basin Electric coming onto the RTO. Yes, they did come onto the RTO. At first, they were hesitant. One of the reasons behind that was that they have some pretty lucrative contracts with non-members, and they weren't too sure if they would lose those contracts with the RTO or be able to pursue more like that. I don't know what transpired, but they turned around on it. So they are on board, as is WAPA. So it's a big plus for Tri-State getting in, and many others getting into the RTO. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is a bothersome thing for Tri-State that's coming up more and more often, and that is a phrase that's being used throughout the country, and it is graceful blackouts. And Tri-State is very much against that. A blackout is not a good thing no matter what. But this keeps popping up, and Tri-State wants to make sure that people understand that they do not support a graceful blackout. And with that, I'll just open it up for questions if anybody has some. Kirsten?
What was the word before blackout? Grateful?
Gracious. A gracious. No, it was grateful. You're right. Grateful blackout.
Is that like you drink so much you're happy when you black out? Or
No, I think I'm wrong. I think it is gracious, it's a gracious. I'm sorry, I put it down wrong. So it's gracious blackout is the term.
Oh, gracious blackout. So it's
I
a nice way to
apologize
say
for that.
rolling blackout would be gracious. I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know what it's trying to say because the blackout is nice. So I don't think there's any nice way to say blackout.
Okay.
So,
In
my
the second
thought.
question, sorry, in your report, you talk about the recent board meetings have had longer executive sessions. And the reason for that was given that it's the nature of the discussions, but it doesn't seem to be a partial, and it doesn't seem to be about full. It seems to be about other stuff. So are you being excluded from those executive sessions? Or are you there?
No, I'm there for the whole thing. And
Okay.
the executive sections are kind of interesting because there's, like this last time, we had 4 different levels. The first one, we had all the board, staff, member CEOs and member staff and member directors. Then it went into just CEOs and staff, I believe. Then it went into where the United and Northwest had to leave because it was talking about some of the legal. Then we went into complete legal to where it was just strictly the board and staff, no CEOs, no members.
Yeah.
And then the last part was just the CEO and board members, no staff at all. So, and I didn't make notes. I was looking back to see what went where. I can't remember which level things went, but I've been able to attend all of them because we are not challenging Tri-State legally at this point.
Okay, so they're not excluding you from when they're talking about United and PBD, even though we've been discussing partials and such. They're saying, okay, that we'll deal with that when it comes. That's progress.
That's correct. They discussed
Good.
that when I'm in there. Yes,
Excellent. Thank you.
you bet. Holly?
Hey, Kohler, thanks for all your work. There's a couple of things you said that were just kind of curious to me. If that whole blackout thing is curious, because I wrote down graceful like a ballerina. And I can see how if it's gracious, grateful, or graceful, you don't want it to associate with blackout. So that just really piques my curiosity, to tell you the truth. Also, you were talking about the Basin annual meeting. Did you go to that?
I did not, no.
Okay. I was just kind of curious what the word is. How are they so similar to other GNTs and have similar problems? What kind of similar problems? I just didn't know if you had any examples.
Well, shutting down base load, at certain dates and trying to put in, equivalent replacement, dealing with the depreciation and also the financials. Basin right now is actually financially pretty strong, but the only reason why is because the price of gas went up very high in the last year. And that made a huge difference for their Dakota operation. But otherwise, they're facing the same financial things as what Tri-State is. So those are kind of the things. And that's the best I can tell you because I was not there.
All right, cool. Thank you. And the last question is just real quick for Jessica. On page 64 on from the chairman's report, it says that they're receiving positive feedback for text and emails to the board and member CEOs with updates and advisories. I'm just kind of curious, what kind of things are they advisorying you on and updating you on?
On texting? That's what it said?
Yeah, that's what it says for member CEOs. So I didn't know if you're getting texts and updates and advisories.
I can kind of fill that in for you, and that is that just like what I was talking about with these different levels of the executive session, what they're doing is sending out communications for people that might want to come in at a certain time or have to be out at a certain time. What they're doing is notifying everybody that has showed interest in being there, when it's going to happen, when it's going to start, and when it will resume.
Great, thank you.
I think that's what he's referring to there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say, Holly, is that all I'm getting is text saying like when to go back in, which is helpful. But I mean, I think that's where Kirsten, you kind of alluded to this, but some of these executive sessions are going on for like 6 hours, 5-6 hours. And while the member CEOs are invited to portions of it, it's like 30 minutes or something, and then we're kicked out. And so it's helpful to get those texts, but you get them like 5 hours later that you can rejoin, and then I'll rejoin, and then they end the meeting. So there is a lot of frustration with members, and even Dwayne is talked about this. And Kohler, from what I heard the last discussion, is that Dwayne's going to work with legal staff to really kind of tease out what's appropriate to be in executive session. Because I think what they're kind of concluding is that some of it should not be an executive session and they can kick it out. But still, I think it sounds like primarily a lot of it has to be an executive session.
Yes, I agree.
Real fast on the graceful blackout, though, I just wanted to put what I've only heard through the grapevine. I haven't seen it in news or anything else, but from what I was told, that term really came up because of the Hawaii wildfires, and they, are in court now because they're saying that they did not have a blackout, basically turn everything off, when now they're contending they did. But I think, at least I could be wrong, but that's at least what I was told through the grapevine. That term came up because people are now talking about, well, if Hawaii is going to go bankrupt because of this, then our first move as electric utilities should just be turn off all the power. And how do you say that? Well, you say it is graceful or gracious blackouts, but I don't know. That could be different. Thank you.
Rachel, you might be muted, or you are muted.
Oh, next. I noted that it looks like Pat Bridges announced he's departing, and I didn't know if this just is happenstance, if this is part of, I know there was a cost reduction strategy, and so they're if they were seeking senior leadership retirement or if this is like a cultural indication. Just because I think, right, the attorney recently left. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, I know that Pat wanted to retire actually a little bit earlier, but he stayed on due to all the things that are happening right now. And it was not a surprise at all. It was expected. It was actually expected earlier. And he did, I can't remember now the date that he said it was, something like March. So he gave plenty of, notice ahead of time so we can find a new CFO. But no, it's not a turnover of the whole leadership. It's just some of them are getting ready to retire. And that's what happened with Ken Wright as well. You bet. Tim?
Thank you, caller. Again, I applaud your great information that you bring to us every month and your attention to trying to get us up to speed. So, but I'm asking about the Western States Power Corporation. I did go look at the funding authorization. I went to the Wix or whatever it's called, where you go get the presentation off Tri-State site. So it's $22 million is almost 23 million is the contribution of Tri-State to a nonprofit that then, I guess, funds things for Bureau of Reclamation. And then that somehow gets paid back in a bill credit, which to me sounds kind of like, Tri-State's now entering into the loan business because they get their interest back and so forth. I don't know, this thing seems, $23 million. That's kind of what their margin they thought was going to be this year, right? I don't know where they come up with $23 million to put into a nonprofit that, it's probably a drop in the bucket for Bureau of Reclamation, $23 million, and then get some interest or something back. It just doesn't seem right. It seems kind of funky, I don't understand why a G&T has to fill in the government expenditures on this basis. And then, I don't know, it's just weird. 23 million of members' dollars go someplace, supposedly it gets paid back. We have no accounting here at all of what really happens there, for how long, over how many years. And I assume that the board of Tri-State approved this. So it seems to say. So
yeah,
I'm just pointing out
happens every
something
year,
doesn't
Tim.
seem right here, So
I can tell you just a few things, and then maybe Jessica, because she worked with the government, can kind of explain how this works, because the logic in it really is kind of makes you scratch your head. That amount, that $23 million, is actually done in installments. It's not all at one time. And what happens is the government doesn't get their funding to be able to do what needs to be done for the grid, basically. So what they do is they put this money forward, Tri-State and the other members, and then the government pays it back, plus interest, plus it's not a filing fee, but there's another fee on it. But it's the way in which things can get done in a more timely manner, just because of the bureaucracy of the government, the best I can understand. And Jessica, maybe you could help me out with that, because I really don't understand how the government does their budgeting. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that, Tim, and get back to you. Off the top of my head, I think I need to go back through and look at it.
Yeah, I understand this is an authorization for 1 year. It just makes me wonder what the bigger picture really is here. And as Tri-State's using member money to do this, is that the best thing to do here with our money, especially at that rate? So anyway, I appreciate it.
It is for 1 year, and it has been going on for years. So this isn't the first time this has happened. This happens, well, every year I've been on the board, it's been it's happened.
All right, I missed it in years past, or maybe Tri-State didn't report it in the same way. Anyway, all right, thank you for your help. And
You bet. Rachel?
Oops, lowering my hand.
Okay, Kirsten?
Yeah, Kohler, that was happening when I was on the board too, and I did ask for a good explanation and I got one, so we just need to dig up that explanation. I think Pat he's probably got one that he just takes out of his file every year to send it to those of us who forget how it works. But if it helps you at all, Tim, I am not concerned about it. I was not concerned at all. I was aboard because of it, the way it's done, and that we are not the only G&T that does that. This is the way that the money has to move. And it seems weird, but it also seems safe.
And it goes throughout the whole country. They're called different things, but they do it, and they have to do it to get the projects going forward. Anyway, thank you. I don't see anyone else, so I'll turn it back over to you, Ted.
Great. Thank you very much, Kohler. Item 3 on director reports is fast track. So Tim, take it away.
Yeah, there was one emailed question, I think, from Kirsten prior to the board meeting. I think the question was the 500 miles. What was the source of that? That was Brandy Reiter, who's the head of the CBO, Colorado Broadband Office. Right? Otherwise, the written report stands, and if anyone has questions, I'll be happy to try and answer.
Tim, sorry, I raised my hand. That story in the paper this week about the outfit laying fiber up Florida Road. Is that a big deal? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or
well, I can't speak for that company or anything. That's a company called Clear Networks, I believe was the company. And
oh, okay.
I think that from my understanding of what I read, that they're going to connect up to there'll be the possibility to connect up to 1,900 homes in the Durango area off that broadband, off that fiber optic connection at $50. And I checked with a couple of friends who live along the way there, and they pay $80 to another company for their broadband connection. So seems like for the consumers in Durango, that might be a good thing. And personally, my long association with Fast Track would suggest that more fiber is good. I believe Fast Track will have some role in what's called the backhaul or middle mile fiber connection to that one. So from the Fast Track perspective, that's not a competitor. We're not in the home fiber to the home business, and we will probably benefit hauling some of that traffic through the middle mile. So does that help?
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Rachel, I think you have a question. Yeah, and
I was curious about it was the Mountain West Conference, and you had some great bullet points in there about some of the takeaways. Something about high cost of power, winners and of installs, winners and losers. Is that
right? It's a Mountain Connect conference. It happens every year. Yeah, it's a big thing in Colorado, although I've not gone to one before. But yeah, I think I highlighted some things that Kelly had highlighted in her report. And one of those is that, again, Brandy Reiter, who's the head of the Colorado Broadband Office, a cabinet level position, who presented, essentially acknowledged, even with $826 million from the Fed's BEAD funds coming here, that it's not going to be enough to cover all underserved areas in the state, which is kind of counter to what Governor Polis had said is we're gonna achieve a certain goal by a certain time. And this acknowledgement by a cabinet level officer, I think, was kind of concerning to some, because the immediate question is, are you one of the ones that will get some of that and be able to no longer be an underserved community? Or are you the ones going to be left out? And will most of these funds end up on the Front Range, where there's greater access to private equity and capital? So I think it's just an indication of, yeah, it sounds great, but if you're an underserved area on the West Slope, we'll have to fight like the devil to get those funds. Put it that way. Still, does that help?
It does help. It just made me, I found myself kind of maybe conflating some things, but thinking about, we have similar issues getting USDA funding down here. Everything just costs more to do, and so it looks less sexy in some ways. And so just underscoring that coordinating function that perhaps LPEA and others are taking on when you're putting in for these projects, because maybe it makes it look better.
The CBO is also the office where that $826 million from the feds they will be the ones who determine where those funds go, right? So that's who's been assigned that task by the governor. So there's I think a concern, from the people who heard that, oh, you're already telling us that whatever a high cost area is might have trouble accessing these funds, which kind of makes you go, well, isn't that what they're for? To try and address underserved high cost areas. So I don't know, but those people all live in Denver or work in Denver in that area. And so maybe their ears get filled by those voices, and rather than us who are far flung. So that's a concern. So I'm just pointing out, even though there's some great funding coming, unless we fight hard, we may not get it. Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. CREA, Holly, what do you have for us?
Oh, great. Thank you. So I do have a report in the board packet. There has not been any updates to anything that is included in that report in the last couple of weeks. I would like to point out that the first day we talked about net metering extensively. There's going to be legislation potentially coming down the pipeline. They're still trying to evaluate what it's going to look like. There's a discussion of whether it's a one-to-one energy charge, a one-to-one, retail rate. So that's what I understand is one of the big hanging points right now. I also included in that report a link to the Holy Cross website that explains what they were proposing, and it's quite informative if you go through it. Pretty interesting read overall, and as well as the opposition to it. There's some nonprofits that are, actively running campaigns in the state to try to oppose some of the things that Holy Cross was trying to do specifically. We did have the election of officers. Jenny from United Power. I'm sorry, I can never pronounce her last name correctly, and I don't want to butcher it now. Anyway, she is term limited out, and we will be having it's in the report. Sorry, I have lived a lot of life since I wrote that thing at the end of last month. This is dumb. Anyway, it's in the report. I'll look it up if you guys need it. What else did I want to tell you? I don't know. Did I give you guys any report on the solar garden tour? No? Okay. I'm sorry. I will work on writing that up. David actually was able to also come. Unfortunately, it also was just CREA's Kent Singer and Cassie Glow, who is their new communications person, was able to attend, as did Debbie from San Miguel. Debbie Cokes. It was very, very informative, and I will put together some information on that. Let me see. Liz Fittis. I think this is one of the biggest pieces of information from my report. Liz Fittis, who has been the head of the education department for CREA for a couple of decades now, is retiring. They are promoting from within a young lady named Julie Baker. Let's see what else. I believe that's all that I really wanted to bring to the forefront. The next meeting, to the best of my knowledge, is during the Innovation Summit weekend. So thank you, Kirsten, for pointing out that information. They will be having the basic board level financial decision making class on Saturday, and on Sunday they will have ESG class, which I think it would be pretty fascinating. And I forwarded some information from Julie Baker regarding the whole agenda of that weekend. It's a sneak peek. She says it hasn't been widely released. So if you have any questions from that, please let me know. It does have the links to the hotels and the registration point and everything there. But overall, things are going good in CREA land, and I do appreciate the opportunity to represent over there. It's always an educational experience. Joe, what kind of questions do you have for me?
Yeah, I had other plans that I'd made months ago, so I won't be able to go to that. But are they doing any, maybe this could be a question for the new education person too. Is any of that going to be on video or recorded or anything like that? It just seems that this is a big deal, and it would be helpful if they made it available in a different format.
You know, that's a good question. To the best of my knowledge, they have never done anything like that in the past, but I can definitely put it forth to both Liz, she will not be gone till the end of the year, as well as to Julie, and they can at least put it in their thinking cap. But thank you for that suggestion, Joe.
Yeah, and I think that should apply to really all education stuff, that there should be more ways than just having to go somewhere in person.
Okay, great.
That. So maybe you could bring that up to the whole CREA board, because I had addressed this a few years ago, and I think Jessica helped bring Liz kicking and screaming into trying to set that up. So
yeah, fabulous. I will definitely pose that to him. Thank you. All right, Miss Rachel, what you got?
Yeah, I appreciated the links to the various, I guess, websites and resources associated with the net metering situation going on. It was interesting reading through that and seeing some parallels to our net metering policy and some little pieces of feedback or response. And I guess for Amanda, who's new to the utility sector, perhaps, that Holy Cross website and how they explain to a consumer how they wanted to break out rates and what that matters and what that can mean, I thought it was exemplary. It is so, like, from a UI UX, it's like so easy to navigate. They use words I can understand. So anyway, I flag that. But I do also, for all the directors, like, as I've been thinking about our net metering thing and why we're trying to do that, in my probably inaccurate understanding of it, I just, for so many reasons, so many times I come back to this question of, like, is our business model viable in the future? And do we need to start moving to this place of decoupling rates? And so if that, I don't know, again, I thought the Holy Cross website, if you're like, what the heck would that mean and look like as a 101, that website is an awesome starting place to understand what that could mean. The other thing I thought was so interesting, right, because there was a big blow up on this, obviously it's at the governor's office, but that when they looked at changes across the board, it was only an average user would see a 2% increase to rates once they decoupled. Initially, when I heard the whole hullabaloo, I thought, wow, this must be jacking things up in massive ways. And anyways, I wanted to learn more about that, but that just initial bump I thought was interesting if it spells the long-term viability of their co-op. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Rachel. I agree with you 100% on that Holy Cross website. That's indeed one of the big reasons why I wanted to share that with you. So I'll give that feedback to Adam Quinton, their director. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rachel, to your point, we agree. We've been scouring Holy Cross's website because they have a lot of great resources. So Amanda's definitely connecting with their comms person and looking at that. So I appreciate that feedback. So it's good to hear that you guys like that, and that's useful because that's the direction we were thinking of going. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Nicole, what you got for me?
You know, just to echo some of the same sentiments that Rachel said, in general, I've always found your reports to be really helpful. And, you know, it just seems like at the state level, so many of the things they're dealing with are similar to what we're dealing with here. And you do a really good job of putting a little, like, forward, hey, check this out. This is what they're talking about. And so I just want to say thank you for your work on that board.
Oh man, I feel really special. Thanks, you guys. And I'm really honored truly to be there. So appreciate y'all and all of y'all's work too. So thank you. Team effort.
All right, anything else for Holly? Team member David, do you want to tell us about your first Western United meeting?
Sure, but I think I like what was said. Holly is going to be a tough act to follow. So, but yes, Western United Electric is pretty cool. In my past life, you know, we were big enough to buy everything and not have to have the cooperative model. But this is the joy of being with LPEA, learning more, and I love the cooperative model of Western United Electric and the services they actually provide for their member co-ops. So went there, did a thorough investigation of the site. Kirsten had her question about the cable cutting machine. I don't know if you've seen the email I sent out. There's a picture of the cable cutter. Took a look at that. Took a look at their warehouse, but also their PPE, their rubber lab where they do the testing for the gloves and the covers for the wires, etc. So a top-notch job. And in the report, you'll see that they're doing great with the budget, doing great with what they're earning, the margins. The only thing they do have is they have a warehouse full of stuff because they were responsive to the co-op needs. And during COVID, the logistics mess, they bought as much as they could that the co-ops wanted to. So instead of a 3.0 inventory turn per year, they're at a 2.84. Plus they have larger amounts of money tied up in that. The good thing is they bought it, and if the co-op does not want it, they can sell it and probably make a little profit on that. So overall, top-notch job that they're doing. Great cooperative model. I love this. And it was a joy to go out there. And also on the cable cutter, the lawsuit has been settled, and WUE are the ones that won. And if there's any questions, let me see if there's any hands up.
You must have killed it, David.
Oh,
no, Dan's got one for you.
All right, Dan.
I'll get there.
You got it.
David, this doesn't involve Western United. On our LPEA iPads, they do not have Excel spreadsheet on there. So I request that you do a PDF on your roundup report. It'll do PDFs, but it won't do Excel.
Okay.
And then sign up sheet, I noticed your name and Nicole's is not on that sign up sheet for our board meeting.
Dan, they're on there.
Okay, did you get it fixed?
Yeah, it was just a copy
Thanks,
and error of the template. Yep, they're on there.
That's
Thank you though.
That's a great time to remind everybody that that thing exists and go get your name on it. Make sure you signed in for the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any other questions? All righty.
Okay, everyone, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Yeah, final wrap-up comments. I see Kirsten has something for us.
Yeah, just a reminder, I'm going to the Region 7 NRECA meeting next week. Anybody have anything they want to raise up, let me know. I've just been asking folks to see if there's anything. The resolutions are fairly boring, not boring, but there's nothing much that we care about as much. I would like to know if Patrick and or Amanda are going.
You're going to get all three of us, Kirsten.
Oh, baby. Okay.
I know.
Right.
I'm already looking at restaurants, so you'll have to let us know.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Kirsten, maybe you could, again, on this education stuff, if I haven't, NRCA would seem to be doing I took one class online, but I haven't seen any in over a year online. And again, all they're offering should be somehow with a webinar online or something like that, to help us all out, get our education fill. So if you could maybe bring that up to someone, that'd be great.
Anybody else with final comments before we sign off? I'll just take my quick opportunity to say thank you to everybody. I mean, it's we don't agree on everything, but to get 12 plus people to be able to get through decisions like this is really exemplary, and I think we work extremely well together. And I appreciate you all making it easy on me in terms of having to run these meetings and stuff like that. So great team, and thanks very much for everyone's participation. All right, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Bye.
week. Have a good month. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Adios.